Oh, that's Senate Select Committee on Mass Violence Prevention and Community Safety will come to order. The clerk will please call the roll.
Campbell.
Present.
Hancock. Here. Nelson.
Here.
Perry. Rodriguez.
Present.
Taylor. Here. Whitmire. Zaffarini.
Present.
Huffman.
Quorum is present. Welcome to this Texas Senate Committee hearing. We thank the El Paso community for having us here today. It's my pleasure to recognize a distinguished member of our committee, Senator Jorge Rodriguez, to welcome us and to offer some opening remarks.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. First of all, welcome to the committee, to El Paso. We ordered the finest weather we could muster for you at this time of the year. And I think some of my colleagues intend to go to the golf course at some point. I want to thank Senator Huffman, the chair of this committee, who is not here. Her plane is running late, but she'll be here shortly, along with Senator Whitmire, who's also a member of this committee. And I just simply want to say briefly that the community of El Paso thanks the Lieutenant Governor and the committee for coming to El Paso to hear from our citizens about their feelings regarding this incident that occurred on August the 3rd, a mass shooting that was uniquely characterized as none of the others that have occurred across the country, where the individual traveled 10 hours just to get to El Paso, and as he said, to kill Mexicans and persons of Hispanic descent. You probably will hear testimony about the response of the community. I'm glad we have our mayor here. I think our mayor did a tremendous job in expressing the grief and the feelings of our community and some of our other witnesses. So thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee for coming here today. And we look forward to hearing from everyone. We've extended the time, if necessary, from 2 to 7. Chairwoman Huffman specifically scheduled it until 7 at a minimum for people who are working and want to come here after work. But if she were here, she would tell you that if we need to go past 7 o'clock, we will go past 7 o'clock, as we did in Odessa at the hearing there last week. So thank you all for being here. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Rodriguez, and thank you for the excellent job you do in representing the people of El Paso in the Texas Senate. We especially thank our host, the University of Texas at El Paso, not only for allowing this committee to hold our hearing on campus, but also for providing the necessary accommodations for both the committee and the public. The chair recognizes the interim provost and vice president for academic affairs, Dr. John Wiebe, to welcome our committee.
Thank you and good afternoon. My name is John Wiebe. I serve as interim provost and vice president for academic affairs here at the University of Texas at El Paso. And on behalf of UTEP and our new president, Dr. Heather Wilson, it is my pleasure to welcome all of you to this beautiful campus today. I'd especially like to welcome our very own Senator Rodriguez and members of the Texas Senate Select Committee who join us today. Senator Judith Zaffarini, who, as you know, is vice chair of the committee, and Senators Donna Campbell, Kelly Hancock, Larry Taylor, and those who will join us later today. El Paso is a city which has long prided itself on its record of safety and resilience, and in light of recent tragic events here, in our sister cities of Midland and Odessa, and in cities around our state and our country, UTEP offers a forum for discussion so that we can not only better understand the profound impact that instances of mass violence have on our communities, but so that we can work together to prevent such acts of violence in the future. Before we begin, I want to thank the victims, the survivors, and their families, some of whom have joined us today to share their stories. I want to thank also the panel witnesses and members of the public who've joined us today. Thank you for giving of your time to be with us. At this time, I'll turn the proceedings back over to Senator Zaffarini, who will continue.
Thank you, Dr. Wiebe. The Lieutenant Governor, Dan Patrick, assigned 7 charges to the Senate committee. Each of these tasks ultimately aims toward helping prevent these tragic acts of mass violence that have occurred in our state. One of the tasks assigned to the committee is to learn firsthand the personal, family, and community impact of mass shootings in Texas by hearing from the victims and the impacted communities. Last week, we visited Midland, Odessa, and today we are in El Paso. After this hearing, the committee will continue to study the charges and will seek practical solutions to improve public safety. Today, we hope to listen and to learn how we, your state legislators, can help in the aftermath and work toward improving public safety. We have invited government officials, members of law enforcement, and medical personnel to share their experiences. After these invited witnesses testify, we will open the floor to anyone who wishes to speak. As Senator Rodriguez said, we will be here till at least 7 p.m. The floor is now open for public testimony. If you wish to testify, please complete a witness registration card at the desk outside the hearing room. We will begin with our invited witnesses and then proceed to public testimony. Public testimony will be limited to 2 minutes per person. In fairness to those who will follow, we ask that you observe these time limits. And of course, it's 2 minutes to speak and then to be open to questions from the members of the panel. The time limit is intended to allow all participants an equal opportunity to testify before our committee. We will call witnesses in groups of 4, so please be available when your name is called. We'll call the first panel. Chair calls D. Margo, Mayor of the City of El Paso, and Jaime Esparza, District Attorney, 34th Judicial District. Mayor?
Thank you, Senator. I thought Jaime was going to desert me. As Senator Rodriguez stated, what happened in El Paso on August 3rd was atypical from what has transpired with other mass shootings. And I remind people that the FBI defines a mass shooting as 4 or more, which can conceivably be a weekend in Chicago. What happened in El Paso was totally atypical, as I stated. One of the things that we try to get across, that I've tried to get across as mayor, and I'll try to do it rather quickly in my 2 minutes, is the fact that we're a region that goes back over 350 years. The mission in Juarez was founded in 1659, so it's actually 360 years. El Paso, the bulk of the population for our Paso del Norte region was on the south side of the Rio Grande until 1848 when Fort Bliss came here. So we've been one region which now comprises the intersection of 3 states, 2 countries, and a population, the largest in North America, on the border of 2.7 million with an average age of 32. Media would ask me, was I surprised that 8 Mexican nationals were killed during that shooting? And my response was no. That's who we are. We're on both sides of the river, families on both sides, commerce on both sides, and that's what we're about as a community. This was an individual who came from 700 miles away, totally hate-filled, evil, white supremacist, who determined to unleash his hate on our community. I have told people on numerous occasions as well that under no circumstances would I believe anybody of that ilk would have ever come from our region. It's not what we're about. It's not what we've been for for over 350 years. So, I've done a couple of programs with Nan Whaley, the mayor of Dayton, Ohio, which occurred that night with us, and her issues are different than our issues. Our issues were hate and white supremacy crime, and somebody who had to be deranged in some form or fashion. But with that, I'll stop.
Thank you, Mayor. And for the record, the 2-minute limit is for the public witnesses, not the invited witnesses. So if there's anything else that you needed to add?
Well,
please go ahead.
I can't say enough about our first responders. For those that don't understand the timeline, at 10:39 on the morning of August 3rd, a 911 call went out, and at 10:45, we had 2 of El Paso policemen, one a 6-year veteran and one a 6-month rookie on his first day off probation, enter the Walmart. They did not know the shooter was not there. You want to talk about heroes? They're heroes in my mind. At 11:06, the perpetrator was apprehended by 2 motorcycle policemen and 2 DPS agents. So, in a span of a little less than 20 minutes from the time of the report, he was apprehended somewhat fortuitously, just happenstance. I think he got lost. But the bottom line was, I thought our first responders were tremendous in how they responded. And people from all over, where CBP, their VORTEC unit, they all came. Everybody came in. So we went through the process of 22 funerals. 25 people were injured. There's still, I think, one in the hospital right now. And I've stated that I think our healing process will probably take about 3 years. Just guessing, not having the experience there. But my position is I want to make darn sure that this event does not define El Paso. I will not allow it to define El Paso. It is not El Paso or our region, which includes Juarez. One of the anchors for one of the networks said, well, but it's part of your history. And I said, yes, it will be part of our history, but it will be relegated to an asterisk footnote as a part of the El Paso history. And with that, I'll stop.
Thank you, Mayor. And members, if we may, let's hear from the district attorney before we ask questions, if you'll stay with us. Mr. District Attorney?
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Jaime Esparza. Good afternoon. My name is Jaime Esparza. I'm the district attorney for the 34th Judicial District, which includes Hudspeth, Culberson, and El Paso counties. I have been the district attorney for 27 years. I am also the chair of the Texas Council on Family Violence. So I tell you that because I have a few remarks in the end of my initial remarks. It's really, it's hard to talk about this. I see August 3rd, 10:38 as a defining moment for El Paso. I have not spoken publicly except once, and that was for a press conference on the Sunday after the shooting, and this will be my second time. I won't talk to you specifically about the case because we are prosecuting him and we are seeking the death penalty. I also, as part of my duties on Saturday, the day on August 3rd, I walked the Walmart while they were still there, the 19th. It is something, I've been a prosecutor a long time. Senator Huffman and myself were both prosecutors at the same time in Houston before I came home to El Paso. So when I gave my remarks on that Sunday, I specifically remember saying that El Paso was rocked, we were shocked, and we were saddened. And I think we are still that today. We are attempting to move forward, but I linger on that just to, I think something that you should consider is making sure that there is a method, a way, a process, so that the community can come together in a smart and responsible way to talk about this secondary trauma, not just the trauma of the 22, and that is horrific, or the 26 that were injured, that is also horrific, but there were many people in that Walmart, in the Sam's next to it, who are hurting. And then there are those of us who were not there at the time who are also hurting. I give you one quick example. We just happened to have active shooter training in my office the week after. It was planned way before that shooting, and it was rather intense after having gone to the August 3rd event. As a matter of fact, as I sat there, I was thinking this wasn't the smartest thing I've ever done, because you could just feel the tension in the room. But while the presenter was talking to us, he relayed to us a story that he was, after the shooting, doing security work at the Target, and somebody had their car backfired. Everybody hit the ground. Everybody hit the ground. And it took a little while to settle people, and it's just a sign of that secondary trauma that I think needs to be discussed, and there has to be some process so that people can talk about this so that we can move on. I think if we don't discuss it, we won't be able to move on. We were, as the mayor said, we were a safe city. I still consider us safe, but you cannot forget what happened on August 3rd and how that happened to us. As my role as chair of the Texas Council on Family Violence, many of you probably know that annually we publish a Honoring Texas Women report, where we list all of the women who are killed by domestic violence by their intimate partner every year. And in 2018, the latest report has 174 women being killed. 103 of those were killed by firearms. That's 59% more than the national average. I bring it up because I think when it comes to mass shootings, when you look at the long view, many of these mass shooters have a history of domestic violence. So I would like to leave you with this one idea, something to consider. We tried this last session, House Bill 3191. It didn't get out of the committee, but the Texas Council and the agencies that help us, we were supporting a plan to have gun surrender protocols in every county. Not a statewide protocol, because we felt like a statewide protocol would impose on counties, because we're so different across the state, that couldn't meet the protocols. So our proposed legislation was to allow these protocols to be developed county by county, so that each county who knew the rural areas versus like El Paso or the larger communities would have their own way. Because right now we don't have a really smart way of surrendering the weapons. And many of you probably know that under the federal government, if you get convicted of a domestic violence crime, you lose the ability to carry a firearm. You also, under Texas law, if you're convicted, you would lose that for at least 5 years after your probation was completed or your sentence was done. We allegedly are allowed to take your weapon in a protective order situation or under bond conditions. So there are many ways, an emergency protective order. But if you travel the state, you would ask, well, what is the process that we would use? Here in El Paso, we have on the protective order, we're working on, not me, my office, but I know the county attorney, Joanne Bernal, and are working on a plan to surrender their weapon with the help of the sheriff. So we have some basic surrender protocol. In my office, we are working on that project as well. In Dallas, I know they have a more developed process, a more developed protocol. But I think in order for us to enforce that law across the state, we have to be able to have a responsible way of taking the weapon and giving it back to them when they're done, if they're entitled to have it back. I think it's just a way of enforcing the current law. I thought that we would have better luck in the House this session, but it just wasn't meant to be. But maybe you all will address this with some more energy and with more earnest, that we would be able to have success here. I don't think it's asking too much to have a process so that we could enforce current state law, so that we would be safer. This is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. I know that you all are aware of that, and this is a way to take stock of, one, the femicides that occur in the state, but also I think the relationship between that, the killing of an intimate partner, and mass shootings. I could talk to you about in Plano, when that shooting occurred, that had domestic violence. Some domestic violence was part of that. In the Sutherland Springs, it was as well. In Santa Fe, it was as well, right? As far as we know, it wasn't here, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't address this issue so that we could make ourselves safer. I think you probably have heard this as you cross the state. I think in order for us to address this in some intelligent way, although I don't think we could have predicted what happened to us on August 3rd in any way, but I'll tell you that through the healing process, I think collaboration is very important, both within the public, in the public and in the government sector. I think law enforcement, we can work better together. We need to know each other better, and we need to be able to use that in a really smart way. This is a unique community. I can't speak for the rest of the state. I love living here. I was born and raised here. I was happy to come home after my stint in Houston. This is a great place to live. But even a great place to live can get rocked, can get shocked and saddened by one person's act. I can tell you, just because I know I'm probably on a video camera, so I'm going to just do one little commercial, if you would just allow me this. Our office, we do a lot of outreach on victim assistance. And we've done our best to help the families of the 22 and the 26 who were injured, and the others who are suffering from secondary trauma. But we have a history in my office of doing this. So for the last 12 years, We have walked across El Paso. Initially, it was 26 miles, then it was 10. 26, I got older and wiser. That's too far to walk. This year, it's only 5 miles because we're expecting a large crowd. But on November 3rd, Sunday, 8 o'clock, we're going to walk from Escalante Park, and those in the community know where that is, to the Memorial Reading Garden, where we have a sculpture because of the city, where we honor the victims who have lost their lives due to crime. There are 1,600 names on that wall. Now there's 22 more. And so we're going to walk from the park to there. And all I would ask the community to do is to register for the walk. That would be at epcounty.com/DA. It's pretty simple. It's a free walk. We give you a t-shirt. We welcome everyone. I think events like this, and we've had others around the city, so that we can come together as a community, are very helpful in allowing us to attempt to move forward. The sadness that we felt on August 3rd, I think, is still with us. I can tell you personally, the sadness of August 3rd is still with me. And you're talking to a very seasoned prosecutor. I've seen, well, you can imagine, in 27 years, and my time in Harris County, and you can imagine what I've seen, but I have never seen or never witnessed what happened to us on August 3rd at 10:38. You know, I haven't done it. I didn't do it this past Saturday, and then I feel guilty for not thinking about it. But for many Saturdays after that, I would stop and pause at 10:38, because I think it is a life-changing event. It was for me. It was for this community, and I'm so glad to see all of you here, because I think only through working together with you all and here within El Paso are we ever going to try to be able to protect ourselves in a better way. And
Thank you for your testimony, both of you. And as Senator Rodriguez said earlier, Chair Huffman and Senator Whitmire were delayed in Houston because of airline problems. There was a problem with the crew, and then there's a problem related to weather. But they should be here soon. We're sorry that they missed your testimony, and I'm sure they will be too. Senator Rodriguez, did you have questions?
Maybe a couple of questions. One to both of you. And Mayor, you pointed out that this was a crime driven by hate and white supremacy. And the individual, we learned, purchased an AR-15 type rifle, assault type of weapon. His mother called the police concerned about that. So my question to both of you is, we're here to hear testimony on how we can prevent community mass violence, as happened here in El Paso, and want to hear any ideas, any proposals, any thoughts regarding sensible gun safety legislation, along with any ideas on how to curtail the hate crimes in our community and in this state. So I'm just wondering whether either one of you or both of you have got some thoughts on, or any recommendations, any ideas that you have along those lines.
Well, I thought about that when I was invited to testify, and I would love to be able to tell you that I had a solution. I don't have that solution. I think it's going to be baby steps in a direction to making us a better community. I suggested to you the gun surrender protocols. I think that I would hope that you all would look at that. I think that's an idea that, one, I think that is sellable within the state, and it's a way for us to address what happens, at least what we see in domestic violence cases where there's intimate partner violence, where there's femicide. I think there is a relationship between that and the mass shootings. I can tell you just from what's in the public atmosphere is that our shooter was a loner. I think the issue of whether or not he has mental health issues is questionable. I don't think the automatic response that a mental health issue is that we're going to solve our problem that way. I think it's more complicated than that. And I honestly, as long as my time as district attorney, I wish I could tell you a better solution than the one I gave you, but I think it's baby steps in that direction.
Thank you. Mayor, did you have something to add?
You know, I feel like our district attorney as well. I mean, what we've been focused on is the aftermath. I mean, we are one of the safest cities in the nation, according to Uniform Crime Statistics, as reported to the FBI. We have been number 1, number 2, or number 3 for many years. I mean, we only had 18 murders in a population in our county of 850,000 in 2018. So you see what we're dealing with. One thing I wanted to add that I didn't add at the beginning is the mental health side, to re-echo what the senator and what our district attorney said. Our city is putting together, our Office of Emergency Management, a long-term facility for mental health for anyone who's touched or wants to do it. We're working on that. We've got a victims fund, which right now I think is exceeding about $6 million, but I don't think that's going to be near enough when we're dealing with some of the things we're dealing with. But I want to, as I studied things and talked to our chief of police and other things, I don't have a single problem with any kind of verification on private sales, background checks of any type. I don't care if it's 3 days or 3 months, there ought to be a background check. The red flag laws related to mental health, that can be a slippery slope. I don't have a problem with that. You all are going to have to resolve that. You've got 2 issues that I look at it from that standpoint. One is good Samaritan protections. Somebody reports somebody who has they believe to have some mental health issues and have a weapon, and it turns out that there was nothing there, but they were doing it because of concern, not because of any malice or anything like that. Then you're going to have to come up with some form of good Samaritan protection for somebody who's just simply being a good citizen in their own eyes. And the other part is on the weaponization side, where somebody reports somebody just to get them. So I don't know how you balance all that. That's going to have to be some issues, but I do think the mental health side is significant. We don't know where we are with this particular shooter. I read his diatribe. It's nothing but hate-filled rhetoric and evil. That's all I can say.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
if I can follow up, Mayor, the bill that I filed, the red flag bill, extreme risk protective order bill that I filed, included a provision to penalize people who make false reports to address that concern that you raised, making it a Class B misdemeanor to falsely file a complaint, because some people might want to do it out of malice or whatever.
Right.
And we wanted to make sure that that protection was in there. I think your idea, though, about a Good Samaritan also is something we ought to consider for whatever legislation we might come up with. Plenty of due process, plenty of protections for the individual that is being complained of, including the highest civil standard that you can impose under the law, clear and convincing evidence, rather than the typical preponderance of the evidence. Clear and convincing evidence, as the DA will tell you, is just below the beyond a reasonable doubt in the criminal law. And so the idea of including that was so that it's not easy to get one of these. You got to really present your evidence, your information, in order to have a judge order a protective order with a denial of access to guns. And I think that's, I guess for the listening public here, that's what the district attorney is talking about in terms of that House bill dealing with how do you relinquish your weapons once there's been an order entered by a court. And courts can do that in the domestic violence arena. They can also do it in involuntary commitments in the mental health side. But the system right now does not have any mandatory requirements or any way in which you can ensure that that individual relinquishes their weapon. So I've done some research. There's a lot of states that have passed laws, Mr. Esparza, that indeed provide for a way of having that gun relinquished, and if the person doesn't turn it in within X number of hours or days, then law enforcement is authorized to go and retrieve the weapon. There are some people who are concerned, as we heard in Odessa last week, that that might be a violation of the Second Amendment. But as I pointed out, there's a number of states that have these laws in the books. None of those laws have been stricken down as unconstitutional.
Now, I don't think it's a violation of the Second Amendment. I have a list I could easily provide you of across the state where they have gun surrender protocol.
We
Right.
have what?
A list where other states have gun surrender protocols, where, all we're asking is to enforce the current state law. We just don't have that process. You would think we would, but we don't. And we need we need a process so that we could, when necessary, a person could surrender their weapon. I would tell you that the Attorney General's Victim Compensation Program has been excellent. They have been really good partners. So the shooting was on Saturday. My office, my victim assistance office, we worked all day Saturday, all day Sunday, like many others in the community. And they were here on Monday morning. They flew in, that victim compensation application, they helped people fill it out. We helped people fill it out. Other agencies across the community have done that, and that has really been helpful. There is one little quirk that something that you should think about, but the Victims Compensation Program is not available to the foreign nationals, the 8 that lost their lives. They weren't residents in the state, and thus they weren't able to get the benefit of the Victims Compensation Program. We are, hopefully, through the one fund, are going to be able to attempt to at least monetarily in some way compensate them for their loss, for the economic losses, those families, but those 8 were not eligible for victims compensation. I could tell you, though, that the AG was a good partner in helping us fill out those applications and allowing those victims and the families of the surviving families to be able to get some assistance as we move forward.
Thank you. Senator Rodriguez, is that it?
No,
Senator Nelson?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And first of all, I want to say to everybody out there, it was very important to the Lieutenant Governor when he appointed this committee. I know Chairman Huffman would tell you if she were here. When she is here, she will tell you that we specifically were directed to come to El Paso and listen firsthand, and that's what we're here for. Mr. Mayor, you said you will not allow this tragedy to define who you are as El Paso. And I want to share with you that I come from the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and Senator Hancock does also. And I hope everyone understands that we absolutely share in your grief, and we do not want this to define who we are either. And we don't want it to define who Texans are. Thank you. And I have a couple comments that I want to make. Mr. Esparza, domestic violence is an issue that I've been very involved. In fact, in 1999, I passed the bill that established that suspension of the concealed handgun license of a person who was subject of a protective order. And we had a discussion at the last hearing. This is our third hearing. At the hearing in Odessa, we had a good discussion about some things that we might need to look at. There absolutely is a connection between some of our mass violence perpetrators and domestic violence. In fact, that's we know 53% of those who commit these mass violence, horrible, horrible atrocities were domestic violence perpetrators too.
That's correct.
And so, we need to keep focused on that. I loved, you said something I should have been writing down. I was so enthralled with what you were saying, because this issue there is no one answer. I wish there were. I wish there was an answer to how we as legislators could prevent evil. The person who committed those horrible acts in this city was just evil. And I don't know how we prevent that, but there are other things we can do. We've had a lot of discussion about mental health, and we will have more. Your legislature invested a lot of money in mental health and is much more aware of what we need to be doing with mental health that will help us. Senator Taylor led, that Santa Fe shooting was in his district, and he led the charge last session focusing in on our schools and mental health issues. And it's going to take a lot of answers. There is no one answer. And I appreciate the work that you have done in the domestic violence arena. I'm getting to a question, Madam Chairman. I guess, Mr. Mayor, first of all, I would ask you how the coordination of resources went. Was there anything that stood out to you that could have been done better? Hindsight is always 20/20. Is there something that we can learn from just how the coordination of the resources went once?
Well, having
this happened?
this occur first time
Yeah.
for me, I thought that we all met at the 9/11 Fusion Center every day for hours. DPS, FBI, Department of Justice, our police, our fire, emergency management, the DA's office. All of us were constantly being informed. You know, the governor's $5.1 million grant to us that came out of some prior legislation, I think you all did, was very timely for our overtime with our first responders. I think we had $500,000 for that as a part of that bill, and then the bulk of it, I think, goes to prosecution charges, which we will exceed. And the governor said if we have any issues related to the overtime on first responders, for me to let him know. I haven't heard any feedback on that yet to determine whether we need to do that. But I thought we had, from my standpoint, I thought we had good coordination of all state and federal resources as well as our local here.
Okay.
I went over and visited at the scene with the investigators over there. I did not go into the Walmart, but I visited and saw what they were doing and how it was being processed. The governor gave me a couple of things that I needed to know from it's kind of ironic. He has as much experience as anybody right now with now 4 shootings, and told me some things we needed to do to expedite things for the families, and we did. So as far as I can tell from the coordination that I observed firsthand and participated in, everything was fine.
Yeah.
I thought everybody responded very well. And I'll tell you that what stood out in this community, I went on the Sunday afterwards, I'm over in the hospital visiting with the family of the 10-week-old baby who lost his mother and his dad. And while I'm there, they'd already identified the mother, but the father had not yet been formally identified. And they get that call while I'm there. And then we leave and we go over to the blood service, United Blood Service, and there have been people waiting there for hours to give blood, 11 hours to give blood. And they weren't going to quit till they gave. And that's what this community is all about.
What was especially harsh, unfortunately, there was no way better to do this, because I do think the response was, I'm sure there were places we could improve, but it was appropriate. I was at the command center at the Sam's store very quickly, and law enforcement responded. Those first responders responded really quickly. It was unbelievable. What was hard though was we had a reunification center where if you had been in the Walmart or you had family in the Walmart, you could go to. I went by there around 11 o'clock on Saturday night, and unfortunately, I don't know if there was a better way, but it took us a long time to be able to formally identify those who were lost. And that was extremely, extremely harsh and brutal for those families who've lost someone. I don't know a better way. As I tell you, I was in the store. There is a process, just from law enforcement standpoint, that things that have to be done, especially when there was going to be a prosecution, and that I know that slowed the process down, but it was it's not unforgivable, but because I actually don't know a better way, but let me just tell you that it was very, very tough on those families who lost someone, because it took us a while before we could officially notify them. And that was harsh.
I can't imagine.
That was one of the things the governor talked to me about, was he said apparently it took much longer in the other prior shootings for the release of the victims to the morgue and ultimately for the funerals. And he said, you got to get it done quickly. And I want to compliment the El Paso Independent School District. They were also part of it. They set up this victims center where the families went. They staffed the cafeteria. They were there 24/7 along with the Red Cross and everyone else. I mean, everybody coordinated, and it was just kind of amazing the way they came out. But shooting occurred at 11:30, 10:30 on August the 3rd, and I think we had the final victims processed on Monday afternoon, wasn't it? Monday afternoon. So I was told that was, we worked hard. I told our chief that we needed to get that done and done expeditiously so that we can start closure for the families.
Madam Chairman, I have just one more question while we have Mr. Esparza here. We have given a lot of attention to mental health recently, and we're going to continue to do that. Not everybody who is involved in mass violence is mentally ill. But we know that that is an issue that we need to address a lot of our attention to. So from a prosecutor's perspective, I'm sure you encounter offenders who don't really need to be locked up, and you know that. They need help. They need mental health care. Do the prosecutors in your area, do you feel like you have the tools that you need to direct these individuals into treatment? Do you work with your local mental health authorities? Can you tell us while you're there? And I won't get into specifics with the
That's
individual
okay.
who committed the crime here, but while you're there, I want to ask you if you feel like you have what you need to direct those individuals into mental health treatment.
I'm glad you asked me that question. I wanted to tell you, I'll answer your question, but I wanted to tell you this nuanced, at least from my part, a nuanced view of, I don't disagree with the mayor that we should not let this event define us. And you've probably seen the hashtag El Paso Strong.
Yes.
Okay. I love that idea too. But I think what is forgotten in both of those statements is the nuance of this secondary trauma that will affect this community. And we give ourselves sort of like, it won't define us, so muscle up. And we are strong, so muscle up. That is a good solution, and I think it's one way to move towards healing. But there are lots in this community who muscling up is not the answer, where seeking treatment is the answer, talking to somebody is the answer, because if not, we'll see people drinking more.
Yep.
We're going to find harm in this community in other ways because of August 3rd. And I don't have a clever way of having to put that together. I like El Paso Strong, and I want us to be strong. And in our walk, we talk about that. And I don't want it to define us, but I think there is this undercurrent of emotional hurt and trauma that needs to be addressed. In this community, to answer your question, and I'll forget this, I do want to thank you for your work on family violence issues. You've been a good partner, all of you, and I really appreciate that. Thank you. We have a task force that's working on that, on our mental health issues. We have a sheriff, Sheriff Wiles, who does a lot of work in this area. EHN, they do a lot of good work in this area. We are moving in that direction. I think what is troubling to me, just from a prosecutor standpoint, I love that we focus our energies on that issue. I do think it's needed. You should know that I am a big believer of victims' rights, not just that we talk about in the community, but in the courtroom. And so when I think about this issue, and I think it's an important issue, And I like to think of myself as someone who will collaborate on this issue. I also worry that when the defendant, the perpetrator, has committed a violent crime and there are mental health issues, it is not so simple, because I'm asked this on a rather regular basis, that we should maybe release him to somewhere else. I'm concerned about releasing that person to the community. I don't know, we are in El Paso working on that balance. Where is that balance? When can you assure yourself that you can do that? Many of the perpetrators that we see, and they commit all sorts of crimes, from low-level stuff to more serious stuff. If we could just get them, and this isn't my area, and somebody else I'm sure will testify, could we just get them to take their medicine on a regular basis? That would be their medication. That would be such a boon in the right direction. And how do you do that, right? But this community is committed to working on that mental health issue. I can tell you, they meet regularly, and they certainly appreciate your resources.
Good, thank you.
One thing, our police department set up a crisis intervention team 2 years ago. This council started funding it. We mirrored it after Houston and what they're doing. We work with Emergence Health, and we trained 14 out of our first police academy a year ago, and we're constantly training. And we have the advocates riding with the police. We need more. We also need more beds. We need more beds for those that need to be committed for whatever period of time, and that's an issue. But on the police side, we are focused on that crisis intervention team to de-escalate issues and to be able to have trained police and support for that.
Awesome.
You wouldn't be surprised if I told you that we want to address this mental health issue, I'm sure, across the state, but it's going to take a lot more resources. The mayor is exactly right. Where are the facilities that support that effort? Where are the resources that support that effort? I think the state, and you're correct, you have dedicated lots of resources to this issue. It's going to take a lot more.
Yeah. Well, and I'll add this one postscript, Madam Chairman, and then I know others have questions, but we are hurting with professionals. Even if we have the resources for the beds and the treatment, Texas has a growing population, and unfortunately, we right now do not have enough mental health professionals to meet the needs that we identify right now. So, but we're working at it. We know there's the problem, and we're working hard at it. But thank you, and to the citizens of El Paso, it's our hearts are with you, and I try to find a silver lining in everything, and it's real hard to find a silver lining in this. But to watch the community, the lines willing to give blood, and your first responders, there are so many good people out there. So thank you for what you do.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Campbell?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Rodriguez, and thank you both for coming today. And I'm happy to be on this committee, to work with the committee to see what remedy we can come up with. But Mr. Rodriguez, do you have Esparza? Sorry, I'm already on panel 2. Mr. Esparza, do you have any opinion regarding the saturation of social media and mental illness, the effects it has on the mental health of the transition age between 1929? It would be an opinion unless you work with domestic violence a lot.
I do.
And the other crimes that you cover.
I'm handicapped. I'm 62 years old.
Well,
And so my social media understanding is limited. I'd have to talk to my 30-year-old to really get a complete understanding. But I will tell you this, in seriousness, that the unchecked messages that come across the internet are extremely troublesome.
Yes.
And the way a lone wolf can tap into the internet in total privacy, what we don't know, is a scary thought, where they can communicate with each other. I mean, one of the things that happened in this case, and I'm not telling you that's something that's not public, is that we work on this case not just with Department of Public Safety, the El Paso Police Department, and other law enforcement agencies. We also work along with the help of the FBI and the U.S. Attorney's Office. And certainly there, it's interesting to see what they can develop evidentiary-wise from some of the things that we found, right? And what I can tell you is, I think having social media unchecked, whatever side, whether you're left, right, middle, it doesn't really matter.
Right.
Wherever you are, having it unchecked is really scary to me. Because it is possible for, if you don't really watch what people are doing on the internet or listening to or having conversations with, we may be getting results like we saw here.
Another question, Mr. Esparza. Do you feel like your local mental health authority is prepped adequately or broad enough or has enough resources, is probably a better way to ask, for not only the ongoing mental health that they're tasked to do, but this secondary trauma?
Well, first I would tell you I'm probably not the right one to give you the broad overall thumbs up or thumbs down. I would tell you from the criminal prosecution end, the work that they're doing to try to look at exactly who we incarcerate, why we incarcerate them, and their mental status, that I think we are headed in a really positive direction. We are working towards trying to address that issue so that we're not housing you just because you have a mental health issue, right? So you commit a crime, we should be able to address that, but not everyone deserves to be incarcerated especially pretrial-wise, just because you have a mental health issue, right? And so I can tell you locally, I'm encouraged that on the steps that we're taking to address that issue.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator. Other questions? Senator Rodriguez?
Just to follow up on something that both the mayor and our district attorney said with regard to the Mexican nationals. As the mayor pointed out, we share a long history of two communities really bound together by commerce, by trade, by family, by culture, by language. And the fact that you had 7 or 8 people from Juarez killed at the Walmart is a testament to that relationship, because anybody who knows anything about the border knows that the border's economy is driven in large part by Mexican shoppers, business people. And so when the DA mentioned that the Texas Crime Victims Compensation Fund does not provide for assistance to those individuals and their families because of the residency requirement, there's in the Crime Victims Compensation Fund, you have to have lived in the area for at least six months, I believe. Welcome, Senator. And so the thing to remember is that these Mexican nationals were shopping here, and some people may think, well, why should they benefit from the Texas Crime Victims Compensation Fund? Well, for one thing, they're paying taxes. I mean, they're over there shopping at the Walmart and paying the sales tax. People come over here and they pay the gasoline tax when they get gasoline, and other ways that they contribute. Some of them own a lot of property. They have businesses here. So I think it is worth for us to look at that feature of the Texas Crime Victims Compensation Fund. If we're going to have any more of these incidents occur along the border, I think I can safely predict that there's going to be people from both sides of the border becoming victims, and we ought to be, as a state, having Mexico as our largest trading partner, doing everything we can to treat those individuals, those victims, the families, fairly and equally as we do our own here on this side.
It is an unfortunate issue that we aren't able to address a system through victims compensation, those Mexican nationals. As Senator Rodriguez is exactly right. I know, Senator Zaffarini, you understand exactly what I'm talking about. Juarez is our neighbor. That we live in this region with them. They benefit from us. We absolutely benefit from them in a lot of ways, not just economically, culturally, and others. But they are our partners, our daily partners every day, and it is unfortunate that the Crime Victims Compensation Program that is not permitted to address that issue. Something to look at.
Thank you. Senator, do you want me to continue with the questions?
You can ask your questions.
Thank you. My question refers to that Crime Victims Compensation Fund. When we were in Midland, Odessa recently, we heard that that was very helpful in many ways. And we addressed the issue of what is the best way to get financial help to the victims immediately when they need it. For example, a victim who needs grocery spot, who needs a funeral paid for. What is the absolute best way? Do you think that it's through the Crime Victims Compensation Fund, or should we go through a foundation, or that takes a long time, I understand? The Chamber of Commerce, I know, has helped in some cases. What is the best way to help the victims who need help immediately?
I don't want to diminish the importance of the Victims Compensation Program. It is extremely helpful. It'll pay for funeral expenses. It'll pay for medical expenses to a certain degree. It pays up to 60 visits for mental health issues. It will pay for lost wages and loss of support. There are a variety of things that they can do. But I can tell you that especially in the 4 weeks after August 3rd, we were receiving calls of people who had some exceptional needs. For instance, something you probably never think about. But if you were at that Walmart and then the shooting occurred and, well, you were lucky enough to survive, but then law enforcement had you exit. And then we took complete control of the scene. And we didn't move those cars for easily a week. People had groceries in their cars. So you can imagine when they finally got their car back, what that car was like. And how do we fix that? How do we help them fix that? We had people who had vehicles who we kept them, law enforcement kept them, and they had bullet holes, so we're not releasing them. It was their only vehicle. How do you address that issue? Some people just had some very immediate needs. And I have to tell you, the Community Foundation, they were very helpful. I could pick up the phone in unique cases and talk to them about, well, can we help them, right? And I think that was a vehicle that we used a lot in those weeks immediately after August 3rd, because my office, we have been in contact with all 22 families, the 26 and the 26 who were hurt but survived, and they have, just you can imagine, they have unique issues that victims comp just isn't made for that. And I don't have a solution except that the foundation was the easiest way, and they were able to kind of skip the bureaucracy so that we could help them. One of the ways we did that was it was a woman whose car had been shot up, and it was their only vehicle. And what did the foundation do? Well, they knew a local car dealer who allowed them, who worked with them, and so they got a car. The person who had the car where the groceries were in all week, well, we were able to, with local help from the business community, they were able to help. We had to get some vehicles for people who had cars they couldn't get to them because we weren't going to release them. So that the foundation helped them get rentals for that period of time because we weren't going to give you your car back. There was a process, and it took a while before we started releasing vehicles, at least a week, maybe more. And so that was a problem. And all these other issues that occurred through these families while they were in the store because they fled. And there are some immediate needs that, well, the bureaucracy just isn't going to respond in a way quick enough to help them through their need.
We had two foundations that came together that have been doing this. We also had every funeral home in El Paso provide free funerals to every victims and their families. We had United Airlines fly every family member in from anywhere in the United States that wanted to come in for the funerals. I mean, the outpouring was phenomenal.
That's amazing. Did you deal with any fraudulent attempts to collect donations?
Not, not that I know of. What I thought was really, I think the mayor just said it in a really smart way here. So what, besides victims' compensation, the El Paso community stepped in. But we are lucky that we are a large enough community to be able to step in. In areas that are smaller, where the resources are less, I think it would be a real challenge. But we were lucky that when we held hands, we were able to help each other. Because we have a lot of resources. We're not a large city, but we're not we're about a mid-sized city, and we have a lot of resources available to us. That helped us a great deal.
That's wonderful. Given your experience now, looking back at the Hate Crimes Act, do you have any suggested amendments to that law?
We have a Hate Crimes Act. As a prosecutor, I've never found it that helpful. It doesn't really enhance the crime to the point that it makes a difference. And generally, I would not use it because I can already punish the offender in a way that I don't need the hate crime statute. In this case, for instance, I don't need the hate crime statute. Will these issues of hate, white supremacy, will they come forward in a trial? They will. But that will be in the sentencing phase of the trial, where we have a wide open, mitigation issue, whether he has mitigating evidence or not. And so we'll deal with that issue. I don't have a good answer for you. I can tell you, though, that the one that you have, I might have, in my 27 years, I might have used it once.
Thank you. You gave us some excellent suggestions regarding the gun surrender protocol. Do you have any other suggestions for laws that we should consider?
Well, I have pitched a couple of them to you all as a group, as a legislature, where we haven't had luck, especially as my role as the chair of the Texas Council on Family Violence. But I would love to spend time with you talking about the NCIC bill. It came out of the House, it came out of the Senate, and this is not a criticism to the governor. The governor was not able to sign it because there was an amendment to it that, we tried to keep off. But I would love for you to look at that so that we could put the conditions of bond on the NCI so that law enforcement could deal with that issue immediately, instead of having to rely on whether or not you currently have your court order in your hand or not. And that bill really, it should have passed for reasons that didn't really permit the governor to sign it. We weren't fortunate enough to have that passed. But I would easily be able to send something to your office and talk to you about that.
Thank you. And to your point about the relationship between domestic violence and mass violence, that dates back to the first act of mass violence in Texas, the sniper at the UT Tower.
Oh, that's right.
And he killed his mother and his wife before going on his rampage at the UT Tower. And to your point about healing and it taking 3 years, I was on that campus more than 50 years ago. I still visualize the sights and the sounds. And only last Saturday, we had a ceremony honoring the person who shot the sniper. And to this day, people who were there are still emotional, still are healing. And that was more than 50 years ago.
You think that I can relate to that, Senator, because my wife and I love to go to Barnes & Noble on the weekend and we read and drink coffee. So 3 individuals walked in, and really for no good reason, we were apprehensive, right? My guess is they were fine.
Right.
But I didn't read for about 30 minutes until they left the store, right? It wasn't right.
It's very
I should have
sad.
felt comfortable. I've been to that. I go to that same Barnes & Noble. We drink coffee and we enjoy that time there. But you cannot help at least for me, after August 3rd, you cannot help but look over your shoulder.
And it'll be with you for many, many years. It's my pleasure to yield the gavel back to our chair, our distinguished chair, Senator Joan
Thank you.
Huffman.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Jaime, for being here. I've known Jaime for speaking of 30 and 40 years, a long, long time. So we go back to days of the Harris County
That's
DA's
right.
office. So it's great to see you in
Likewise.
the position, the wonderful job you do for El Paso. And Mayor, thank you for being here. I'm sorry I missed your testimony. I will go back and review it on the archives to make sure that I hear the points that you made. Senator Whitmire and I were delayed in Houston by that same United Airlines, but things happen by a 4-hour delay. But thank you both very much for being here. Did anyone else have any other questions? Okay, thank y'all very much for being here and the input you
Thank
provided
you.
today. Thank you. And we will call up our next panel. We have Jorge Rodriguez, Juan Cervera, and Michael Grady. And while they are coming up, I want to recognize some House representative members who are, I believe, should be are they in the audience? In the audience, we have Representative Cesar Blanco. If you want to stand so I can see you, hi. We have Representative Art Fierro is here also, and Representative Lena Ortega. Thank y'all very much for being here and participating today. Okay, Jorge Rodriguez. You may begin, sir.
Good afternoon, excuse me. My name is Jorge Rodriguez. I am an assistant fire chief with the El Paso Fire Department, and I also serve as the emergency management coordinator for the City County Office of Emergency Management. I'm here to give just a quick overview on the response, the Emergency Operations Center activities that we conducted for the 12 days that we were activated, and then some of the recovery efforts we're in right now. Beginning with the initial response, some of that you've already heard from the mayor. It was a phenomenal response where the perpetrator was apprehended within 30 minutes of the event. We had over 105 firefighters, paramedics on scene, over 140 El Paso Police Department on the scene within that time frame. Also to include, as you know, we have a very large law enforcement presence here, so we have many of our law enforcement partners from Texas Department of Public Safety, FBI, ATF. It was a phenomenal scene of trying to secure not only the initial Walmart and Sam's, but we had some phantom calls coming in for the mall, which were also being addressed during that time. The role of our Emergency Operations Center is primarily to address three main things. It's to manage information, consequences, and resources. We were activated within the first 20 minutes and fully staffed within the hour. The Emergency Operations Center is made up of multiple different agencies, from law enforcement, fire, or utility companies, streets, our representatives from the hospitals to help manage the distribution of all the victims that were injured to the area hospitals, and then of course our great nonprofits, Red Cross, Salvation Army, United Way, that played a significant role, which in the recovery it started within the first several hours. Once the scene was secured, dealing with the consequences, the Emergency Operations Center established the Family Reunification Center, working with El Paso Independent School District and MacArthur School. And we were there for approximately 2.5 days. That's where the victims and their families were given information. And from that activity, we moved over to, and we established the Family Assistance Center, and that was held at the Convention Center downtown. The Emergency Operations Center continued to provide support to get resources and well over a dozen of different agencies to ensure that the families had access to resources at that center. Also out of the Emergency Operations Center, we worked with the local mental health authority to establish 5 different recovery sites for the community. And concurrently, for this type of event, in the 12 days, not only did we provide the support for the command post at the Walmart scene, the Reunification Center, the Family Assistance Center, but also the presidential visit, and we also had a very large vigil that occurred on 10 days after at the Wednesday. So we were active for 12 days. Part of the recovery process that we've been in almost 2 months now, we are working with our area partners. We established a recovery and resiliency framework that helped us coordinate the Victims Fund, the mental health support for our first responders. You know, it doesn't matter how long you've been in that line of work. What was presented at that scene was something that will not be forgotten. So we want to make sure that our first responders have resources. The establishment of our resiliency center, which is going to be called the El Paso United. That's being headed by El Paso County, the Office of Emergency Management, City of El Paso, and the United Way. That'll be online in early November. We also have a work group to address the long-term needs. I mean, we're in a marathon now. That's the way that we like to think of it. And to your comments, Senator, we want to make sure that we have that education to the public to let them know that if they are having symptoms of post-traumatic stress or anything, we want to make sure that they're informed. We have to inform them first before we can provide them services. And the services are available now. We have a recovery center that's provided by a local mental health authority, and that's available free of charge for anyone that may have been directly or indirectly impacted by the event. Also, there's a big financial component to this event. Thank you for the support that you provided our city with immediate funding, but there's also some various grants that are being worked through to help support the El Paso United Community Assistance Center. Additionally, we have a after action review work group that is looking at the response from all aspects. And so while working with them, we hope to be able to provide a very global view of things that we did well, and of course areas that we can improve. But I think it can really be a benchmark for other communities if they have an event like this in their communities. I just have two comments that I'd like to say. One is in October of 2018, we had a complex coordinated attack exercise here in El Paso. It's a very large scale active shooter type of exercise, and our area partners that we work very closely with. El Paso is very unique in that we like to designate ourselves as an urban island. We don't have people that commute to El Paso. Everybody that works here lives here. So between our local, state, and federal law enforcement partners, I mean, we're all neighbors. So ultimately, we all have ownership to this community, and that showed itself when we were at the Emergency Operations Center. I mean, we had FBI, DPS, and like the mayor stated, that's where we have our executive policy group, our mayor, county judge. So there was that level of collaboration you will not see anywhere else. There's no division here. But support for those type of full-scale exercises are critical, and to be able to have your communities prepared for these types of events. So any type of resources that can be provided to communities to be able to put on those are essential, because everything that we had in play for the exercise, all we had to do was put it into play that day, and it showed. And I'll close with a lot of the relationships that we've built with our local nonprofits. Really, this incident happened in the backdrop of the migrant crisis, and if it wasn't for that event that occurred, that began in early January and started to wind down towards July, it really strengthened those bonds, and so I'm very appreciative of all the partners we've had in being able what we did on August 3rd and every day thereafter. Thank you.
Sir, one of the questions I was going to ask you, I think you've more or less answered it, but it seemed to me just from what I've learned about what happened here, and I was on one of the early round tables when the governor came here, and so I actually heard you speak then.
Yes, ma'am.
And it seemed to me that El Paso had done everything right, and you responded so quickly that it was pretty amazing. Everything, the follow-up as you've gone through it today, it's really been amazing. And my question was going to be, how is there something that we as a state can help other cities or mid-sized cities and larger cities to have themselves as prepared as it appears that El Paso was in your own way? But now that that I've never heard the term urban island before, but that makes a lot of sense. So people were able to respond very quickly. Is there anything else? And you had the training, the large-scale training, which clearly is very helpful. Is there anything else that you could suggest that we could do to help other cities to nudge them, let's put it that way, into being more prepared just in case something like this happens?
Well, one of the most significant things is encouraging and supporting your emergency management programs. So then this differs from your public safety emergency management. It's more strategic level, and it's that one unifying entity that can help coordinate all activities. If that's a missing link, then it becomes very, very, very complicated. For smaller jurisdictions, that's usually one of the most difficult
Yes.
divisions or departments and agencies to fund, but it's one of the most critical. Also, these types of events differ. They really don't differ from what you would see in typical disasters, but the processes that we've seen and the structures from the local, state, and federal level, even within the local language of a disaster declaration, which we did with the city and the county the day after, there's not much language that gives us access to resources where we can scale up to the state and even to the federal level, because natural disasters are looked at very differently. And right now, there's not one avenue
Right.
to help access, and those are some of the difficulties with even the victim fund.
Exactly.
They're not
Which
immediate.
we talked about, there should be a way to kind of circumvent that, and we should be able to be a little more creative. Though I think the governor's office has tried to be creative in some of the responses
Yes,
and so forth.
very much so.
Correct? Yeah.
Very much so.
But it would be nice if we had that organized ahead of time. Kind of, we want to do, kind of like we've done to prepare after Harvey, right? When we sort of had the bill that said, these are the rules and regulations that the governor has the authority to waive in a disaster. It would be nice to kind of, fix it so there'd be other kind of disasters that we would be creatively thinking ahead. Yeah.
How do we draw a line from the local all the way to federal level to be able to access resources? And that's not to say that we didn't have the resources we needed, but there's a big learning curve where, if from the emergency management perspective, when we're looking at a disaster, there's a very straight line. But for these, you end up opening up another world that deals with it's not very clean. So that's it's something that happens, not only has happened at the local level, but the state, but and at the federal.
Yeah. Does anyone have any questions? Senator Nelson?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. You made a comment about making sure that we inform the public who may be having mental health issues where to go. And I think it's so important, that is important, and it's so important that as we talk about these horrific events, that we not associate all mental health problems with individuals who commit horrible crimes. Because most people with mental health problems don't commit horrible crimes like this.
Right.
And it's important that while we're educating the public, and I'm so glad you talked about that, because, at some point in their lives, a large number of people experience depression or suicidal thoughts, and we're doing a better job. We've still got a long ways to go of helping those people, but we need to do a better job of making sure that we as a society don't stigmatize those people and make it hard for them to come forward. It's hard enough as it is. And so that's a part of it that I want to be sure that we emphasize, that we're going to try to provide more resources, but we also want, while we're showing people where to go, to make sure that they know that it's not something to be ashamed of. And, you're not ashamed of having measles or yeah.
Yes,
I'm not
ma'am.
going to stigmatize it. So
Definitely.
thank you for bringing
Yes,
that
ma'am.
up. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Chief Rodriguez. Can you, first of all, how often, you described the community mock event that you had. Was that in 18? Is that what you said?
That was in
2018?
October 29th, 2018.
18. How often do you have citywide or mock community disaster drills that would utilize some of the same protocols to get emergency help available, staff at hospitals, things like that?
I mean, that's probably one of the most exercised scenarios in a small scale. So maybe in a hospital setting, all the way up to this. So I mean, it's been we
You do it annually?
we do it more than annually.
More than
So,
a couple
yes,
of
ma'am.
times a year?
Several, I mean, between different, within their own independent structures, I think most jurisdictions from the school districts to hospitals, they're doing them at least annually, but as a comprehensive emergency management program, I think last year we did one comprehensive tabletop, and then we had that full scale that led up into the full scale.
Okay. Another question, what seemed to work well in this event, and what seemed to be the most challenging that, you know, just in retrospect and after action report, could have done better, or not done better? What was most challenging?
One of the, on the areas or most challenging was the initial support for behavioral health resources in the community. Our local health provider did an amazing job. They went into action and had 5 different sites on scene, but that was really one element that we hadn't completely.
Just limited resources?
Not so much limited resource, but it wasn't an area that we had exercised to the point that I would have been happy with. So ultimately, that was my responsibility to ensure that we looked at all different areas. But in the response for this was one of the biggest areas that we did well on. But the degree and scope of it for the long term is one that we really don't take into account. We did a really good job for the initial response, but the long term is where we had to bring in additional resources from the state to help support that, because you're providing support for an entire community, and that requires a lot of resources.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Zafferini?
Thank you. Sir, did you see any need to offer counseling services for the first responders who also dealt with the aftermath and the trauma?
That was one of the, I think one of the best practices that we've taken from other jurisdictions is the importance of dealing with the first responders. On the fire department side, we actually brought in all of those that responded, all 105, and they were able to get debriefed and provided them access to resources on the first day. And we have a work group specifically to address all of the different agencies that were on scene to ensure that they have support systems within their organizations, and if there isn't, to provide any additional resources. But yeah, it's been an ongoing process.
Thank you. Earlier you said something about any resources that the state could provide. Do you have any particular resources in mind that the state could provide?
Not at this time. The state was great. We had on the, depending on the scale of your event, the medical examiners were supported through a DMORT team that was sent in by the state, and they were here within 24 hours, which was amazing. So that's an area that they provided us support. DPS, of course, has always been a great partner here locally. But at this point, there's everything that we asked for, they provided.
Excellent. It's good to hear.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, thank you very much. And now we have Mr. Cervera. Yeah. Hello?
My name is Juan Acevedo.
Yes,
That's
sir.
my second name,
Okay.
last name, okay?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Honorable Congreso, I write this speech in English too. I'm going to share that with you. But I like to give some voice to the people of Mexico who suffered. That's why I'm going to express me in Spanish.
Yes.
Okay.
We have these. Whatever you would like, whatever you'd like to do.
Bueno, lo que perdimos todos el 3 de agosto en El Paso durante la matanza que planeó y ejecutó con fatales consecuencias el supremacismo blanco en el terrorismo doméstico, como han definido los investigadores, es difícil sintetizarlo todo, toda esa angustia y todo ese dolor causado en este speech. Agradezco esta oportunidad de dirigirme a ustedes con gran respeto por este país maravilloso que ha sido ejemplo mundial de generosidad y de participar con gran sentido moral en acciones pasadas desplegadas en muchas regiones del mundo, llevando esperanza a los pueblos que sufren. Por todo esto reconozco que la gran mayoría de los americanos y ningún pueblo del mundo comparten este odio sin sentido que nos ha dejado conmocionados en esta vibrante comunidad binacional. Como juarenses, sabemos de los afectos arraigados por generaciones entre ambos pueblos que compartimos familias, trabajos, amistades, desarrollo de comunidad, comercio bilateral, cultura y diversión. Más del 80% de todos los que aquí vivimos somos latinos y muchos que vienen de más de 40 países han encontrado aquí su destino para desarrollar una vida de grandes privilegios en el sentido de una vida de seguridad y una ciudad llena de respeto por los demás. Por eso los hechos que se dieron son incomprensibles. Por eso la respuesta de la población que no ha permitido que ese discurso de odio y esa retórica de aquellos que no comprenden que el mundo cambió para ser mejor y no regresar a la violencia entre comunidades que son diferentes en su color, en su idioma, en su cultura, ya que esta, en vez de ser una amenaza, es un gran activo para la región y de comunidad para hacer más grande a Texas, a América, y todo esto beneficia a Juárez y a México. En Juárez tenemos nuestros propios problemas y este oasis de paz en medio del desierto nos permite construir el legítimo deseo como mexicanos de encontrar en El Paso, en muchas ocasiones, cuando las cosas y los problemas han crecido en nuestro país, el refugio, un lugar que nos acoge y nos respeta. Hoy perdimos la confianza ya que muchos juarenses y mexicanos de origen o de descendencia se consideran objetivo de ese odio y racismo que sembró Patrick Ward Crucius y que puede ser replicado por aquellos que traen una descomposición en su capacidad de analizar lo correcto y menos evaluar su propia destrucción, ya que es terrible que un hombre tan joven sea capaz de generar tanto odio y resentimiento por una comunidad que no comprende ni entiende y que solo ha venido a contribuir a este país en todo tipo de actividades y que hoy son más del 15% del total de la población de los Estados Unidos. Los muertos que no debemos olvidar y los heridos que aún sufren las consecuencias de esta terrible masacre que aunque nos trajo dolor, pudimos enfrentar gracias a esa gran capacidad de afectos que compartimos y fortalezas que tenemos como ciudades hermanas, con las grandes y complejas situaciones que enfrentamos por la incomprensión de la administración del gobierno federal estadounidense, pero que el gobierno estatal del gobernador de Texas puede y debe desde su posición ayudar a que todos estos hechos no se repitan por el bien de todos. En memoria de los 22 asesinados ese día, sean mexicanos, americanos o de otros países, lo sentimos mucho de todo corazón. Tuvimos 8 muertos mexicanos, pero casi todos los que murieron tenían apellidos latinos. Hoy reconocemos la reacción de los policías, soldados y agentes federales de todas las corporaciones. Reconozco al alcalde Dimargo de la ciudad del Paso y su equipo que nos ayudó tanto. A todos los legisladores y congresistas que han venido a expresar su duelo y nos visitan cotidianamente en Juárez. Al condado del Paso, que ha puesto un gran esfuerzo en darle su merecido a aquel que se atrevió a romper nuestra paz y que su acción despertó los mejores valores de nuestra sociedad. Hoy solo nos queda aliviar el dolor de los que sufren por las pérdidas de sus padres, de sus hijos, de sus hermanos y amigos y conocidos. Aliviar el dolor de aquellas familias que enfrentarán durante muchos años consecuencias de esta acción en su salud física y su salud mental. Acompañar a aquellos que estuvieron en el área de la tragedia y que sufren secuelas emocionales. Tenemos 90 de ellos mexicanos que estuvieron en ese sitio. Y al final, como comunidad, enfrentaremos todo ese discurso que nos quiere destruir, pero que al final solo sacó lo mejor de nosotros mismos. El Paso y Ciudad Juárez Strong prevalecerán por encima de los que no quieren lastimar y por los que en su miopía no dimensionan la grandeza de nuestra vecindad, ni comprenden las raíces profundas que tenemos en nuestros pueblos hermanos. Solo quiero pedir adicionalmente que la ayuda a los que no se han recuperado por este problema siga fluyendo. Hoy he recibido la llamada de un señor que hirieron a su esposa, hirieron a su hijo, hirieron a él. Él tiene colostomía, tiene una herida todavía abierta y lo cambiaron de hospital. Tiene 3 meses ahí y creo que vamos a tener otros 6 meses por lo menos todavía en hospital, que cuesta mucho. Los mexicanos nunca nos preparamos para este tipo de problemas y casi nadie tiene aseguranza. Y ese problema les puede crear un profundo, una situación financiera que nunca van a poder arreglar en toda su vida. Y el apoyo del Fondo de los Mexicanos lo hemos recibido puntualmente por parte del Paso Community Foundation, que les ha entregado mes a mes, permanentemente desde el proceso, 1,500 personas a cada uno de los heridos y $1,500 por persona a cada de los heridos y a cada uno de los muertos. Así que, sin conocerlos a todos, los hemos acompañado en su dolor y los amamos, aunque ya no están muchos con nosotros, pero muchos siguen vivos y con ellos y de ellos nos tenemos que ocupar. Gracias. Any question in Spanish? I try to do it. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. Muchas gracias. Sí. Senator Zafrin?
Thank you, Madam Chair. ¿Cómo están trabajando los oficiales de las dos ciudades para asegurar que los heridos y las familias de los que se murieron o los que fueron matados están recibiendo toda la asistencia que necesitan? Usted dice que están recibiendo $1,500 por mes.
Sí, actualmente a través del Paso Community Foundation, que hicieron un fondo que está manejando un grupo de expertos para juntar todos los dineros que generosamente el pueblo americano juntó, más ¿cómo se llama? Duplicación de apoyos. Hemos recibido a través de esta gente, los acompañamos a las casas de las personas y entregan personalmente los cheques a las familias y a los, ¿cómo se llama? A los deudos, como les decimos nosotros, a los que quedaron.
Pero todo este dinero viene de personas que contribuyeron para esta
Aquí
causa.
en los Estados Unidos,
Sí.
dentro de un fondo que se concentró por el Paso Community Foundation y que hay un grupo de personas que le está encontrando un destino correcto a ese dinero.
Pero no son fondos del Crime Victims Compensation Fund, todos son contribuciones.
Así, contribuciones generosas del pueblo americano.
De estadounidenses.
Exactamente.
Sí. ¿Y los mexicanos han asistido también?
Mire, uno de los grandes problemas que tenemos es que los mexicanos estamos sumidos en tantos problemas que no vemos que este problema en términos reales deba recibir una atención especial cuando tenemos los mismos problemas nosotros en nuestra comunidad. Entonces, no podemos darle una atención especial a algo que sucedió en esta frontera de esa forma económica. Pero el gobierno mexicano está atendiendo a estas personas directamente con los recursos que puede.
Pues gracias por su liderazgo y lo acompañamos en sus sentimientos.
Muchas gracias, senadores, y muchas gracias por escucharnos y permitirme. Gracias, senador Rodríguez, por invitarnos.
Y gracias por estar aquí con nosotros este día.
It's a little delay while I listen. Does anyone else have questions?
Yeah, just,
Senator Rodriguez?
just one question, brief question. ¿Qué más puede hacer el estado de Texas para las víctimas de Juárez? What else can the state of Texas do for the victims of Juárez?
Yo creo que sí ellos deben de tener acceso a ese fondo porque ellos murieron aquí, como bien se dijo, y sobre todo que es una costumbre mexicana compartir temas económicos y venir a compras, etcétera, así que de alguna forma contribuimos económicamente en impuestos, etcétera, y no deberíamos relegarlos de recibir esa ayuda porque murieron papás y dejaron a su viuda sin ningún ingreso, dejaron niños que todavía no reciben educación, y todo eso el Estado mexicano no tiene la forma de darles una compensación para que tengan una vida que sea digna en el futuro a muchas de esas familias. Nosotros estamos dándole seguimiento puntual a los que ya regresaron y que están teniendo unas terapias en México. Pero México en sí no tiene los fondos y como usted bien sabe, senador Rodríguez, ahorita tenemos muchísimos problemas en Juárez con los más de 30,000 migrantes que nos han regresado por el programa MPP. Y eso nos ha hecho un hueco en las finanzas públicas de más de 30 millones de pesos que hemos invertido en lo que no debemos estar invirtiendo.
Gracias. Thank you.
Any other questions?
You
Okay,
would ask him about that.
if you'd like, yeah.
Sí, me preguntaron hace unos minutos mis colegas que qué quiere decir su título, representante del gobierno independiente de Juárez.
Sí,
Exactamente.
I
¿qué quiere
represent the
decir
city of Juarez in the United States, and I represent also binational affairs, whatever is about commercial and political issues and all, everything that is like a diplomacia de ciudades, the city diplomacy.
Yeah.
Because right now, as a big cities like we are here, we need this kind of effort.
So you can answer questions in English too.
Right. Yes, a little bit.
This is the border.
This is the border, exactly.
Yeah, so if
Okay.
anybody wants to ask in English.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you. Call now Michael Grady, Pastor Grady.
Yes.
Thank you for being here, and you can take that microphone.
Good afternoon, and thank you for holding this particular forum. It's much appreciated. I am Pastor Michael Grady, and pastor of the Prince of Peace Christian Fellowship Church here in the city of El Paso. Came to this city in 1974, returned in 2004. My wife is from here. We retired military. And on August the 3rd, our lives were devastated with the tragedy that happened in our city. Our daughter was wounded 3 times at the Walmart. She was probably the first one wounded outside of the Walmart. And she had given some donation to the soccer team and was turning around to get her change back from what she had given. And she made eye contact with the gunman. And she began to run, of course. And he shot her 3 different times, 3 different locations on her body. She had the wherewithal, after being shot 3 times, to call her mother, who happened to be at Dillard's. I was at home, hadn't turned the television on at the time. I was clearing my emails, and her mother was able to get to her at the Walmart location. And there was an employee named Thomas, a Walmart employee, that helped my daughter and my wife until I was called. I left home and made my way to the Walmart as best I could. And me and my other daughter, and we finally got to the place where we could meet up with them. And it was just a tremendous sight to see. The ambulances that staged, the first responders had already come to the scene. There was a lot of chaos. Some question about maybe more than one gunman, someone at the mall, someone at Bassett Center, all kind of rumors were. But our concern was our daughter and getting her as quickly as possible into one of the ambulances and to take her to a place where she can be treated. She recently came home. She stayed in hospital almost 60 days. She had 8 different surgeries. And she's home now, and she's still doing outpatient care with wound care. The wounds have to be healed, and they're working through that process. The psychological and emotional trauma continues every day. I'm also her pastor and her dad. And so how this carnage has affected our family and our city has taken away the concept of safety, because fear is in the atmosphere. You can't shoot it, you can't legislate against it. It's in the atmosphere. It's radicalized in a lot of ways. But El Paso has always been the kind of city. I'm not from here. I'm from St. Louis, Missouri, and I'm from the Show Me State. So I think the best response that we can do, and the best response that the senators can do, and the state of Texas, is to continue to have these kind of dialogues to expose the darkness of our divinity, of our fear, and try to bring people together in common unity. We talk about community, but there must be some common unity. The thing that defines us now more than anything is our fear. We've returned, we've de-escalated to some degree, but there's also a fear that we go back to normality too soon before we speak truth to power. I said my daughter often asks me, why, the why question. Why did this individual drive the miles that he drove and make his way to our city? And I often respond to her as a hatred drove the automobile. He had to stop to get some gas, get something to eat, to go to the restroom, but his hatred drove him to our city. And he brought with him an idea that he could destroy that which he felt threatened him. And so he said he came to kill Mexicans. I don't want to get into that issue. Michelle is definitely not a Mexican, but she's our daughter. And we stand together in this city in unity to try to bring us together to talk about, are we really prepared? Someone said earlier that the slogan, El Paso strong. Well, again, I'm from the show me state, and we'll see if we're strong. It's going to take a long time for us to heal, not only in this city, but in Midland, Odessa, Canton, Ohio, and all over the nation. We've got to deal with the reality that something has changed us from being our brother's keeper, from having sincere compassion for one another, to be able to tear down walls and build bridges. And I'm convinced today that the greatest thing that the Texas legislature could do is to try to come up with common sense gun legislation. I said to Michelle, she said, well, Father, I'm not a Mexican American. I said, but bullets don't know who you are. You were in the way of this maniac that came to our city. You were outside of the store, and he felt anything that was in his way of getting what he wanted to do had to be eradicated. But I'm grateful today that you had this kind of a forum. I think it's so important. But I think that we need to have the kind of common sense gun legislation, and in our city, we need to provide means and opportunities for us to continue to have this dialogue. There is a coalition for peace and unity being established by myself to try to bring our city together, to talk about, to expose these kind of situations, and to build a kind of coalition that we're able to respond in like kind and sort of speak truth to power. So I appreciate you giving me an opportunity. I'm representing Michelle Elise Grady, 33-year-old, my middle child, amen. I got a house full of women, and then there's me. But I'm so grateful that you had given me an opportunity to share from my heart and from my compassion. Thank you so much.
Pastor, thank you very much for sharing those words of wisdom that I think we should all take to heart. Well said. And I think it's also important that you representing your daughter Michelle we often talk about the numbers that were killed, but we sometimes don't give the attention to those that are injured and the months and years sometimes of pain and suffering and years of rehab or changes to individuals' lives and their physical and or mental abilities that are forever affected.
Amen.
So I think it's very important that we stop and think about the wounded as well. So thank you for being her voice today and for your words. Senator Zaffarini?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Pastor, are you satisfied with the assistance that you have received in the aftermath? Has your daughter received everything that she needs?
Yeah, I think I'm satisfied. We're satisfied. The hospital or UMC trauma team is excellent. The care that we received at the rehabilitation hospital has been excellent, and now she's back and forth to UMC with the continued rehabilitation. So we're pleased with that kind of support.
That's excellent. Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Does anyone else have questions? Okay, thank you.
Madam
Yes,
Chairman,
no, go ahead.
Not so much a question as a comment, and I think your being here both as a father and a pastor is very helpful for our committee to hear. And I don't know that there's an answer to this question, but you know, this is our third hearing, and we've had discussions about all aspects of how to address this issue. But as a pastor, do you think that Senator Campbell asked a question earlier about the external influences of, just negative, horrible messages that our young people, and may not have been the case in this instance, but we're addressing mass violence prevention. And do you believe that that is a factor in what we as a society are seeing that's different from what some of us encountered when we were young? And I will share with you that I asked my 15-year-old grandson when the Sutherland Springs shooting happened, I thought we needed to talk about it. And he said, a lot of these kids don't go to church. So he said, not everybody that watches video games is going to shoot people, but he said that, many of the young people have counterbalances with them going to church and learning you don't kill people, and hearing from their parents you don't hurt people. And do you think that, I'm going to ask Senator Campbell's question, external influences, do you think that is a factor in some of these mass violence incidents?
Yes, I would have to agree that they are extremely at the forefront of what we see happening today. We've lost our children. We've abdicated the raising of our children, the daycare centers, latchkey programs, and everybody else. We've stopped parenting. We got afraid when the diapers would be called instead of parents taking responsibility for their children. One of the greatest stories, I think, that's in the Holy Writ, John the Baptist was in prison about to be beheaded. And he sent his disciples and said, go ask Jesus, is he the one, or should the believers look for another? And Jesus could have said, go tell him I'm the man and it's okay for him to leave the scene. But Jesus said to John's disciples, go tell John what you see and what you hear. And until what we see and what we hear matches, nothing is ever going to change. So yes, going to church is a great thing, but if I go home to division and child molestation and spousal abuse and divorce and all of those things, it just doesn't match. So I believe that yes, you can be radicalized in many ways, but the greatest influence that the nation has is matching what we say and what we see to the best of our ability. And giving an alternative to a young man or a young woman, that they have a safe place to be transparent and say, I'm dealing with these kind of issues and I don't have a place to go. And nobody's home when I get there. And when I do get my parents home, they're busy, they're tired, there's no dialogue. We don't sit around the table and eat dinner anymore, amen. We're in front of the TV, we're in our rooms with our electronic devices. So we have got to have some culpability and responsibility as leaders in the nation to make sure that we make available opportunities to hear and to respond to these situations and circumstances. I have 3 girls, amen, and they all have internet, they all have cell phones, but we spend time talking together, and that has to go back to that place if we're ever going to affect change. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. Glad you said that.
And just to tag on to that, I think sometimes the safe place has been abdicated to the social media, to have that anonymity.
Yes.
And there can be more negative pressures and things that people see.
That's right.
Rather than positive. And so it gives a false sense of a safe place.
Yes.
When it's not. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much to all 3 gentlemen.
All right,
Thank you
thank
for
you.
being here, for your very important input. Thank you. We'll call it the last panel of invited witnesses, and we'll start with public testimony. We'll call it Dr. Alan Tyrock, Chief of Surgery and Trauma Medical Director for the University Medical Center of El Paso. But actually, you're the lone panelist, yes.
So you 10 minutes?
Yeah. You can take all the time you need. I'm sure you have an important topic. And thank you very much for being here today, Doctor. I'm sure you have a very busy schedule, and we appreciate you coming to talk to us today. And
yeah, thank you. Well, first of all, I want to welcome all of you to El Paso. Is the mic on? There we go. Ooh, it's a little loud. I tend to yell a lot, so be careful. So first of all, welcome to El Paso, all of you. Thank you for coming and listening to us. As you stated, I'm the chair of surgery at Texas Tech El Paso. I'm the trauma medical director at UMC El Paso. It's the only level 1 trauma center for a large area. I'm also a governor's appointee for GTAC, the Governor's EMS and Trauma Advisory Council. Governor Perry appointed me to that, and I was reappointed last year by Governor Abbott. Actually, I was in Austin last week at the committee, or the council. But I'm not speaking on behalf of those 3 entities. I'm speaking as a Texan, 5th generation native Texan, as well as a trauma surgeon. I've been here since 1997. I've been leading the trauma program at our county hospital. I've taken over 1,300 nights of call. I've seen a lot of death and a lot of injuries. But we are a safe community, despite me saying that. We kill each other by car wrecks for the most part. We're the 6th largest city in Texas, the 19th largest city in this country. That being said, we are a very safe community. We're a small community. We all care for each other. I love what the pastor said. There's something wrong with society. It's not guns that kill people. I know that's a trite conversation, but there's something that has changed inherently wrong with us. We don't treat each other civilly. We don't communicate. I'm guilty of it also. I mean, the other day we were at Landry's having dinner with my family, and I went to the restroom. I came back. All 3 of them were on their cell phones checking things instead of conversing. And I could be just as guilty as they were, because I tend to do that too. So I need to say I'm a firm believer in the Second Amendment. I truly am. But I believe in responsible ownership of guns and safe ownership. Full disclosure, I do not own a gun, unless you want to count a BB gun that I bought for my kids a few years back, and I don't even know where it is now. But I hunted deer and dove for most of my younger life. I grew up near Temple, Texas, East Bell County, and we always went to the hill country with my parents, and we shot deer that's what we did every weekend. Watched the Longhorns, watched the Aggies play, and then we'd go deer hunting. Froze a lot in that darn deer blind. I also remember when Elvis Presley died. We were driving down the gravel road, 2 of my buddies, we were, I think, seniors in high school, and it came on the radio, he died just as we were about to go deer hunting that afternoon. I can guarantee my brother's about to get ready to go deer hunting this afternoon at our great-grandfather's farm, which he owns now. And that's just what we did, and that's what my brother still does. My mom passed away last year at the age of 89. She had a shotgun behind her front door. I tell you what, not a single skunk, possum, or snake survived her front yard because she killed them somehow. And afterwards, she hung that snake on a barbed wire fence because in 3 days it would rain. That's what she believed, and quite often it actually happened. And so that's just how things were. When I grew up, all the guys, we all carried guns to school, shotguns. People that had the pickups, you put in the gun rack. We didn't think twice about that. The superintendent, the principal, only thing they worried about was what we were doing in the parking lot with our girlfriends, and that car was steaming up, or who threw that possum in the school. But what's changed with society? It's completely different now. So I'm going to say some things now that you're going to say, he's sort of schizophrenic in his thinking. Some says he supports the Second Amendment, some says he's against guns. So I'm a surgeon and a physician, so I believe in statistics, in data, to help me make my decisions. So I'm going to give you some numbers, not because I'm pro one way or pro the other way, or con the other way, whatever you want to say. I'm just going to give you some numbers. It's not just about active shooter events. So here we go. There were nearly 40,000 people last year killed by guns. Nearly 40,000. Actually, it's 2017, the most current data we have. And that's CDC data. 60% of these people were killed from suicide due to guns. 37% were due to murders, and less than 3% were either due to legal intervention by law enforcement, an accident, or just unknown causes. Unfortunately, the last 3 or 4 years, we've seen the numbers slightly increase. As I said, it was just under 40,000. But what people don't recall that actually in the 1990s and even earlier than that, there were 30-something thousand people killed a year by guns. So the numbers are still there. Let's do some comparison. 70,000 people died last year, opiate-related deaths. That's twice as many as guns almost. 33,000 people were killed in car crashes in this country. almost as many as guns. So that's statistics. Now, people and patients, people that die, people that are injured, I know they're not statistics. But once again, I have to pull the scientific basis of thinking. The rate of gunshot deaths, the rate per year, and this is rate per 100,000 population, is actually lower than it was in the 1970s. 1997, there was 12 deaths per 100,000 population. El Paso, it's actually even lower. Take out the August 3rd terrible event. In 1975, there were 16 individuals per 100,000. So the ratio has gone down. That's nationwide. Looking at Texas, 12.4 per 100,000. We are the 24th safest city with respect to gun violence in the country. We do a worse job though with motor vehicle crashes. So now I'm going to focus now on active shooter events. You may call them mass casualty event, but we don't even know what the real definition is. The one that we most accept is somebody that's actively shooting that kills 4 or more people, and not including the assailant himself. That's the definition by the FBI, and they actually call it active shooter. Active shooting events are less than 1% of all the gunfire-related deaths in this country. But what's concerning, they're becoming much more frequent, and there are more casualties at each incident. Here's some numbers. Vegas, 2017, 58 people killed. 500 and something people were injured. I can't even fathom that, how to take care of that many patients. Orlando, 2016, the Paso shooting, 49 victims. I had the opportunity to meet with the 3 trauma directors in Vegas last year and the trauma director in Orlando, and I got some lessons learned. Texas has had 3 of the worst mass shootings in the top 10 in this country since 2009, the last decade. Sutherland Springs in 2017, 26 victims or died. El Paso, obviously, 22 victims. Fort Hood, it's 10 years ago, close to where I grew up, 13 victims. And you know they had the other incident after that with less casualties. And then going back further, the Luby's incident, even closer to home. My brother lives in Belton. Killeen is right there. That was in 1991, 23 victims of some idiot that drove his car through the Luby's. And he actually knew one of my friends from school because he was out to kill women. He brought that up. Mr. Esparza brought that up. He brought that up also. There is some connection to females and killing your spouse or a girlfriend or whatever. Then we go back to, 51 years ago, UT. We all thought that was just an anomaly. I remember that I was only 6 years old at the time. 18 victims, many others died. There's obviously other events in Texas. 4 weeks after El Paso, you were there, Odessa, Midland, Odessa, 7 deaths, I think 22 injuries. The same night that this event occurred in El Paso, there were 7 people killed in Dayton. Different reasons why this happened. It's a very complex thing. I guess I got distracted a little bit. So let me go back to August the 3rd. UMC El Paso. First of all, there was a lot of leaders and heroes that day. First responders, police, fire, EMS, the deputy chief did a very good job describing that. But we also had immediate responders. That's a term we use in trauma. Immediate responders is everyone in this room that can go do something to help alleviate the injury or reduce the chance of dying. It happened quickly. UMC received 13 victims in 34 minutes. We had 4 patients in the operating room very quickly, simultaneously operating. We did a total of 8 surgeries that day, within that afternoon. We were done by that afternoon. That's how most shooting events occur. It happens quick, it's over quick, and then you have all the other events. They're all sort of predictable to an extent. Unfortunately, we lost one lady, 26 years old, that afternoon from a lethal injury. My associate trauma director, I think I sent y'all the video. Please watch it if you haven't had an opportunity. He actually testified in Congress for Congressman Escobar, and it's some really good testimony he did. It really impacted him, impacted all of us. We did 5 more surgeries the next day. The Level 2 Trauma Center, Dr. Flaherty, who actually gives his regrets, he wanted to be here also as part of the panel, but he's giving a trauma presentation in New Mexico. But he said, please tell him that he wished he could be here. And he's going to, a lot of stuff he says, you know, Tyler, whatever you're going to say, I'll probably say the same thing anyway, so it'll be redundant. But the Level 2 Trauma Center stood up that day also. They took care of 11 patients that day very quickly. They're actually a little bit closer to the scene than we are. We're about 4 miles away. They're probably about 2.5 to 3 miles away, right off Interstate 10. They had 2 deaths. He and I commiserated over the weekend. We kept texting back and forth. And I remember that Saturday night he texted me, he says, Alan, we're now in the exclusive club that unfortunately is growing. Just like the people in Orlando and Vegas and people in Killeen and in Dallas, because I knew all these people, these trauma directors. So, you know, it hit home, and it still does. The PTSD we talked about, the other people did a good job. It's real. I told the CEO, Mr. Jacob Cintron, that Sunday night, and I told Dr. Lang, who's the president of Texas Tech, we've got to take care of our own, because it's a real thing. It's going to happen. The surgery residents that took care of the victims in Orlando, they actually gave a presentation and research. 30% of those residents within 6 weeks had PTSD. 6 months later, 30% still had PTSD. Maybe not the same people, but the other ones. It affects EMS, the fire, the police, every one of us. And you don't know when it's going to happen. It can just hit you out of the blue. It hit me out of the blue that Sunday. I saw a Paso Strong going down I-10. I go, oh my God, it's us. It hit home.
Madam
So it's
Chair?
real.
I'm gonna cut the doctor off.
No, it's fine.
Sir?
Yes, sir.
Well, if you want to conclude, you can. I just was gonna start picking your mind.
I got some more stuff to say.
The numbers are startling, and I think we're all aware that it's out of control, certainly the mass shootings, but
Yes,
you
sir.
did a fine job of giving the total. I mean, there's 2 or 3 killings with guns in most of our major cities. Out of Houston, it's a routine evening report.
I trained
So
in
I don't
Houston.
think we
That's all.
can
I've
lose,
been
we
taught.
can lose money. What I would like to ask you from your professional position, any recommendations to be proactive in prevention?
Yes.
For instance, well, that's what, I mean, we're here to support the survivors and thank all the stakeholders and first responders. I'm really searching for recommendations on, as the pastor said, reasonable measures. For instance, have you in your emergency room seen disturbed, emotionally disturbed people?
Every time I'm on call.
And
we can't get them out of the hospital.
unfortunately, you can recognize that they're disturbed emotionally, maybe even a danger to themselves and others, and they can leave there and go purchase a gun without anyone raising a red flag that this individual, through due process and intervention by the courts, should not have a weapon for 90 days. That's just one model, an example. Or perhaps someone should do a background check on that individual. If you could address those measures or others from your professional standpoint, I mean, the pastor did a fine job talking about our morals. And I've been in the legislature a long time. I'm just not sure we're going to be able to legislate the morality out of this problem. We can try. Some are more focused on that than I am, because I want statutes that's going to allow reasonable measures, like the person that traveled here to do this horrible crime. They knew he was disturbed when he left Plano. His mother had asked for help. The Odessa shooter, we're now finding out, an officer at a previous encounter in his note said this person will harm someone someday. And what do? We wait, and then hopefully we have the right response after the fact. Your work, first responders, help me if you can from your experience, what maybe some of your colleagues are doing in other states. How do we have early intervention without endangering anybody's rights to hunting and Second Amendment and due process? What can we do as a state to make a difference and make this a safer place? Because I'm looking at some mothers, my daughter, they're afraid to drop their children off at school. So how can we at least let them know we're trying to take the first step in getting guns out of the hands of dangerous persons?
So I thought Amy was back there for a second, so I'm gonna put her on the spot. I gave y'all some homework a couple of weeks ago. I don't know if you got it. You're like me, you probably do it the last minute. It's a quick read. I read it, I reviewed it when I was flying to El Paso, or to Austin the other day. There's the 4 documents that talk about the, oh gosh, I'm trying to think of the name of it right now. It came out of the not Southern Springs. Let me get my glasses on because I can't see because I'm getting old. The Hartford consensus statements, that came out of the shootings of those poor kids in Hartford, Connecticut. The 20 kids that died, 26 people that told, but 20 kids. So the American College of Surgeons got together with various organizations. And what do we do differently? Because we see this, we kept seeing this. We saw Columbine, on and on and on. I'm not gonna go through all the list now. So what do? One of the things that came out was, how do we engage these shooters? We'll talk about what you talk about later. How do we engage these shooters when it happens? In the past, we would wait and set up a perimeter. So now we go in and neutralize the threat. And then the first responders get there in a warm zone, not a cold zone 2 miles away, and they start rendering aid. The other thing that came out of the Hartford consensus is stop the bleed. And that's why I think it's important for you to hear this, because you guys even passed the legislative stuff to enact it in all the schools in Texas. Now we're all being inundated with teaching stop the bleed, which is a good thing to do that. So that's one thing that came out of the Hartford consensus. So I sent that to you. Please, please, please read it. The other one that's more important to what you're talking about.
Say, that's great to do that, the medical response. I'm looking for early intervention. When you see a disturbed youth, like in the Santa Fe shooter, it's pretty well documented that school officials and fellow students knew he was disturbed.
We always see that in
retrospect. No one pulled him off to the side, a coach or a counselor, and say, what's going on in your world? Let's talk.
Here's a good example for me.
We got to be all eyes on board, listen, and when you see a disturbed, threatening person, you got to talk to them. You got to get them help.
Well, it's easier said than done. So here's a good example. I got a guy that came in several years ago, shotgun blast to the thigh. Didn't seem right. Didn't seem right to me. Got the psychiatrist to see him. They says, well, we'll try to get him into the psych center. Took days to get him to the psych center. And then the psych center says, we don't want him because we don't think he is a risk. So then we had to go before the judge. The judge says, he's probably not a risk. He needs to be released. I said, so you're telling me if this guy wants to walk out of my hospital right now, he can do that? Yes, he can. Thankfully, his father came to him and says, Tyrod, this guy, my son, is going to kill himself, or he's going to kill me, or he's going to kill somebody in northeast El Paso. So I went before the judge. It took a lot of work to convince them that even then, while we're doing it, he still could have walked to my hospital. So guess what? He finally gets committed. 2 days. Guess what happened on day 3? Goes home, blows his brains out. We need to do something with this. I think Senator Rodriguez, I think it was Senate Bill 157, I may be wrong with the number. I thought yours was a very good red flag legislation. I think you called it something else than red flag, but it's
early response.
It's early response. It's practical. I think what Mr. Sparza was saying earlier about domestic, those are red flags. I think Senator Nelson mentioned earlier also that not everybody with mental health is going to be a risk. The vast majority aren't. And actually, what they're seeing in the research is actually, don't put your money too much in the mental health side, except for the suicide people. And we're seeing a crisis with the veterans and even active duty. I mean, I see 1 to 2 people each month that shoot themselves, and they're veterans or they're active duty. And I'm not even at the military hospital. We're seeing young kids doing that. The society issue. People, there's something going on here. So we got to deal with that. So going back to what you said, more homework. American College of Surgeons, we put this together. It's a committee of trauma. We argued, we debated, because we had the left side of the country, the right side of the country, the middle of the country, people who are gun owners, people that said there's no way we should ever own guns. We fought, we argued, and we came to some common sense stuff. I gave this document to President Trump personally. Okay, I'm naive. I gave it to him. I said, President Trump, can I give this to your people when he was at the hospital? Can you just review it? This takes the politics out of this issue to a large extent, and it treats it as a public health entity, is the way it should be. We'll talk about that some more. It's a public health deal. He said, sure, just give it to me. I'll read it on Air Force One. Well, hopefully he did. I gave it to Senator Cruz the same day, that morning. I said, you know what? I can't just shake the president's hand. I can't just shake the senator's hand. You know, Trump was at 2 mass shooting events. He was in Dayton, then he flew to us. I got to do more than just shake his hand. I got to say, here, do something, please. I sent it to Cornyn. I sent it to the governor. So I'm please begging you guys and ladies, sorry, rhetorical guys, to please review this. Just read it. It's a starting point. So what it does, it treats it as a public health entity. So what did we do in the 1960s with cancer and smoking? You know, like 60% of people smoke. Now it's, you know, you're a pariah if you smoke. Thank goodness. Now they're vaping and crap. But it takes care of that. That's public health. Car crashes. You think there's more people dying now than it was in 1960s? 1972 was our peak. 55,000 people died each year in the early 60s and 70s per year. Now we're in the low 30,000s. A lot more people are driving, of course, right? And a lot more miles and stuff. But what did we do? Cars were safer, seatbelts. I remember when that came out. Nixon, I think it was Nixon, they passed it. My father refused to wear a seatbelt because government don't tell you to wear a seatbelt, you know. He would put it over his shoulder when he saw a DPS trooper and he'd pull it off. He finally got smart later, but, you know, but we got smarter cars, safer traffic, highways. That's injury prevention. Cancer, smoking, polio in the late 50s, talk and saving, injury prevention, health related. That's what we need to do with guns. Treat it. There is no research really being done. We don't even know if video games are dangerous. I think they are. My kids love them. I see what's on there. I go, oh my God, that's really pretty scary and pretty realistic. And I see what's on TV. Personally, I watched the Joker, the movie, the other day. You know, it's pretty black. I don't know if any of y'all seen it. You probably don't want to. It's pretty dismal. But we don't know if that really impacts kids or not. We don't know. There's no research. There's a lot of stuff that can be done to make guns safer. Locks, security, things like that. There's no research which ones work. We don't even know all these injury prevention initiatives that all the trauma centers try to enact actually make a difference. We think it does, but we don't. Federal government will not sponsor those. We tried to get that passed years ago. I don't know if the state can do it, but it's just not working.
Senator Whitmire, you started your light on. Do you have another question? No. Okay. And I wanted to follow up with a statement that you made because it reminded me of a bill that passed through a couple of sessions ago. I think it was vetoed by a governor. I don't remember even who was the governor at the time, but it allowed, and anyone here who remembers this bill better than I do, but I believe what it did was it allowed physicians in a hospital setting, if they perceived that an individual was in a mental health crisis, that they could actually sign an affidavit, and then that person would go into that two-day observation period. But it skipped the step of having to go for the police officers to go and then go before the judge. So it gave the doctor the authority to make just that initial, I'm not saying for a long-term commitment, I'm talking about a 48-hour commitment. Do you think that would be helpful in some of these situations?
I think it personally,
Just for a very short period of time? I'm not
yes.
talking about, yeah.
I mean, believe me, I want due process.
Yes.
I don't want some ex-girlfriend from many years ago say, you know, he's evil. And,
of course
you
not.
know,
No, I'm talking about a doctor at the scene.
Common sense.
Yeah.
Common
And do you
sense
think
legislation.
the medical community would embrace that and would be willing to sign an affidavit in those situations that would be for a limited period of time?
I personally do think
Okay.
that.
And
I think the stuff that was trying to get passed before, where I could actually, in the confines of my office, counsel somebody like, you know, do you have guns in your house? And,
No, this isn't even
but
really
this is
talking about
different.
guns.
But most physicians actually support that too.
Yeah.
Common sense, when I look at this guy looks like he could be a little risky for himself or his family, or, you know, he's got young kids at home.
Right.
does he lock his guns up?
Well, if the
We're not
individual.
allowed to do that.
Yeah, if the
Of course, we
individual
do
is,
anyway, but-
is deemed to be mentally incompetent, then they would go through the process.
There needs to be some
Yeah.
due process, but I think that would go a long way.
Okay,
I
well,
mean,
maybe
there-
that's
these-
something we can look at
There are
again
these
and-
red flags.
Do you remember those bills, Senator Rodriguez? I think maybe they were Senator West's bills.
Yes.
It's been a while.
Am I
Yes,
right?
yes, it was Senator West.
Okay.
That's right.
It's probably the prior
Yeah.
biennium.
Digging back through
I
my
think.
memory here, but I
Yeah.
do believe that was, yeah.
Right.
It's something we might look at again and maybe.
I think
beef
it's,
it
I
up
think
a
it's
little
worth
bit.
it. I have a question. I don't know, maybe you
No,
still
go ahead,
ask
I'm
me.
done. I was,
I looked at that, the recommendations from the American College of Surgeons Committee that you're talking about. And there are some recommendations here related to gun ownership, ownership responsibilities and all that.
Sir.
You're a surgeon, you've treated a lot of these victims that were shot with the automatic rifle, the AR-15, and the kind of damage that those particular rounds make on individuals. I wonder, you may have described that while I was out, because I came in after you had already started. But I don't see a recommendation regarding banning, high magazine assault rifles.
Yeah.
Is that because, as you pointed out, I mean, you had people from the right, people from the left, and you're trying to reach consensus? Is that one of those where no consensus was reached?
That was one of those that no consensus was reached, because a lot of the people that, if you go through the document, actually own the semi-automatics, that what some people would call an assault. I think what the guy did on the third, actually, he didn't have an automatic. I think he had a semi-automatic, and there is a difference. And, I mean, these bullets do a lot of damage, though. They do a lot of damage. But you're right, that document, if you read at the end, it says, we took the middle road approach.
Yes.
We upset a lot of people because we didn't go far enough. We upset a lot of people because we went too far in our recommendations. And I think that's usually what means you're successful. As a legislature, you upset 50% of the group, one way or the other. What's that? Well, yeah, good point.
Well, here's what's going through my mind.
Yeah.
I mean, you all are surgeons. You all see the damage that some of these weapons of war do to people. And the fact that no consensus was reached on that is kind of surprising to me.
Well, let's look at it a different way, though. If you look at the data, most of us agree on a lot of stuff as Democrats or Republicans. I'm independent. I'll vote for whoever I think is the right person. I get mad at both sides. I'm sort of mad at both sides right now because I think we're so polarized as a country, and that's part of the issue. And one of the things that really disappointed me at the August 3rd, August 4th, is how I got political so blanking quick. Saturday afternoon, it was political. And it was like, my gosh, let's focus on the problem. That's why I kept throwing the public health to everybody. I got interviewed, I think, on Sunday, Monday by 7 or 8 different agencies, including Sky News, BBC, and on and on and on, CNN. Nobody wanted to talk about that. They all just want to hear about the holes. What bleeds sells. And nobody wanted to hear about that. And I kept going, let's look at this, what we can do. Let's do something that's logical. You know, we all agree that probably background checks is a good thing. Not everybody, but most people do, if done correctly. But they don't get done right. We probably think maybe, it does mention on there, maybe licensure or registration for the more, like what you would consider an automatic or semi. Perhaps, yes, those. Gun sales, let's be careful how we do it, but do it right. Red flag warnings, which you push. Most of us agree to that, not just the surgeons. But if you look at the data, it's the preponderance of all us. We agree on most of this stuff. It's that outlying stuff that probably is not going to make a big difference. But background checks, done right, due process, red flags, things like that. Gun safety courses, how to store the gun, things like that. How do we teach our kids? But it goes beyond that. And I don't know how to fix that with the culture and society, like the pastor mentioned. But we got to pull that back somehow.
all right, any more questions of the Dr. Campbell?
Thank you.
I got a doctor one to ask you questions now.
Dr. Troy, thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, ma'am.
I was a graduate from Texas Tech and was here for 2 years.
Oh.
Back 88, 89.
Okay.
It's long, probably it was before you. But I know what trauma looks like and what you have to do. And thank you for all the work you did. Just want to say that I think your comments today have been very pertinent, reasonable, pertinent, and come from a standpoint that is respected. And thank you for that.
Thank you.
And I would just say, too, coming from the emergency room, physicians would embrace a policy that allows a temporary hold for those that we know can cause harm to themselves or others. And we see it, and we are bound by burdensome, bureaucratic red tape that is not good for the patient and is not good for the public or even the emergency room and physicians that take care of them.
We do see that, even if it's not, even if I don't think they're going to shoot themselves. I was like, really? Somebody needs to take care of this guy.
Yes,
Yeah.
we see it all.
It's really sad. Mental health is just so neglected.
So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam.
Can I make one more comment?
Sure, you may. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I know I
please.
go long. Everybody says I talk too much. But the Texas trauma system worked that day. The Texas trauma system worked. I'm going to thank all of you for the work you have done as well as your predecessors. You know, the legislature in 1989 said we needed to have a trauma system.
Yes.
But they didn't give any money into it in like 1992. And then we had the tobacco fund. And then at one point, CPRIT stole it. But I think I'll still vote for that one.
Yes. You
but-
better, Senator Nelson.
Yeah,
Okay.
you know, and get in trouble. But the trauma system worked. I told Dr. Flaherty I would make sure I said that. The EMS trauma system worked in El Paso. But thanks to all the work that has been done in Austin by so many people at the Capitol and the physicians and the nurses and paramedics, on, and the private citizens that support, they go to GTEC and they don't get paid for it. It's their own money that they pay for the most part.
Right.
It's made the Texas trauma system really strong. And I
And
think
that's
that.
what's
So
good.
please.
It's a team effort in Texas. Or I should say, we're all on the same team on
We
that.
are,
And we are
and
very committed
We've
to
come a long
continuing,
way, and I thank y'all for
continuing to
that.
fund it, and we will continue to do so. It's very important.
Thank you for your coming
Thank you
out
for
here.
being here.
You
Yes,
bet.
thank you. All right, that concludes our invited witnesses. We'll begin on public testimony. We're going to keep it down to 2 minutes per person, and we only do that because we have a large stack of individuals who want to testify, and it's only fair that we move through, so those who are at the very end will not be here till late tonight. So we want everybody to testify. Sometimes people, the members will want to ask you questions, and if they want more from your testimony, they will do so. So we'll begin with the first panel. We have 4 seats, so we'll call it 4 individuals. Dr. Juan Martinez, David Stout, Representative Peter Schwartzberts. I don't know, it's not even close. Could you help me with that, Jose? You know? Schwartzbein, thank you. Figured you'd know local. Yes. And Veronica Carbajal. And that might be just close too. All right, are you Dr. Martinez?
No, I'm David Stout.
Good, go ahead, Mr. Stout, since you're up here first.
Okay, thank you very much. Good afternoon. My name is David Stout. I am the county commissioner that represents the area in which the tragic events of August 3rd occurred. First of all, I'd like to welcome you all and thank you very much for taking time to visit our grieving community. It's been nearly 3 months, but the pain is still very real, and we're still trying to pick up the pieces and move forward after such a terrible, racially motivated attack in El Paso and on our people. And I'm here today to talk to you about how this event is going to affect El Paso County and its taxpayers for years to come, and to ask for your assistance. El Paso, as you may know, is a tax-poor community. 65% of the property tax burden is borne by residential taxpayers, and the average home value is $135,000, which means El Paso County only leverages about $4 million per every penny assessed in ad valorem taxes. Since the shooting, we've already spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on emergency costs related to the incident. Overtime costs, travel, and costs involved with holding the suspect in our county jail. We are in a very unique situation because the hateful man who murdered 22 people and injured dozens more is still alive and will go through a judicial process for which El Paso County and its taxpayers will be responsible. We expect that the venue for the suspect's trial will not be in El Paso, making the process even more costly. Our Council of Judges preliminarily estimates that judicial costs incurred by El Paso County will be at least $1.5 million. Our district attorney expects that the prosecutorial costs will be in the same range, and we have yet to understand how much the defense of the suspect will run, but we expect it to be an equally large sum. we have to continue to take care of the victims of this heinous crime. And though through the amazing work undertaken by the different foundations that created our one fund, millions of dollars that have been raised, that surely will not be enough. And we know it will cost hundreds of thousands of dollars in county funds to assist victims and their families to gain access to those funds through our district attorney's office Victim Assistance Coordinators Project. In addition, this community is creating what we call the El Paso United Community Assistance Center, where we plan to offer services to those in our community that were affected by what happened here on the 3rd. The healing process after something like this can take years, and we must be able to provide services into the future. We're looking at a price tag of at least $5 to $6 million to be able to do this. We also want to make sure that we take care of our own employees by providing therapy and trauma counseling for first responders and others affected by the incident. We have and will continue to apply for as many grants possible to help cover all these costs, but there's no guarantee we will receive those grants. And even if we got every single one of them in the full amount requested, it would still not be enough. In addition to changing the laws regarding hateful crimes like this perpetrated with firearms, we ask that you provide us financial assistance so that this community can heal and does not continue to be victimized by not receiving the services and resources necessary or having to pay increased taxes in order to receive them. Thank you very much for receiving my testimony.
Thank you very much, sir. And your name, ma'am?
Yes, Madam Chair, committee members, my name is Veronica Carvajal, and I'm an attorney and group coordinator at Texas Rio Grande Legal Aid. Our experience with natural disaster has shown us that the general public and the legal community is often unaware of the short and long-term needs of people who suffer from a crisis. In this case, it seems the public believes that the victims of the shooting will be made whole, at least financially, through the state's Crime Victims Compensation Program, private donations, lawsuits, and when all else fails, government benefits. I wish I could tell you that's true, but it's not. We just don't know the actual financial impact on our victims. There are workers from Walmart and Sam's Club who were reassigned to other stores, no doubt affecting the hours that all employees received and their income. There are people who were traumatized for weeks and could not work. There are people who lost a loved one and the income they provided. And then there are the families whose lives have been completely upended forever. The breadwinner is permanently disabled and the other parent is unable to work and is trying to figure out how to make the day go long. They're driving around, visiting their spouse at the hospital, going to their own medical appointments to take care of their own medical and emotional needs and wounds, looking for counseling sessions for their children, trying to normalize their kids' lives by still attending sporting events, and still they are made to drive around to submit application after application, chasing down money to pay the bills that will not stop coming. Very few creditors forgave medical bills, mortgage and rent, car payments, utility bills, etc. I echo, as does my team, the compliments that the DA made about the CVC program. In fact, CVC funds a lot of our social workers' time. And while the state did provide additional employees to submit initial applications, the process itself does not face reality. It takes 2 to 3 weeks for an applicant to receive a letter saying they are eligible. That does not mean they get a check. They still have to submit a long packet of forms, which are nearly impossible to fill out unless you have assistance from a social worker. It takes another 2 to 3 weeks, if you're lucky, to actually get money. If you are denied any of the benefits that you requested, the backlog is about 3 to 6 months. We have a family of victims who was awarded a total of $1,400 for lost wages. The cap right now is $700 a week for lost wages. For this family of 6, that is but a pittance of what they were used to making. They now have to wait possibly 3 to 6 months to see how the appeal turns out. If it weren't for the private donations, for the generosity of our community and people around the world, Texans who suffer these horrific personal disasters would be made to wait anywhere between 4 to 8 weeks, if they're lucky, to receive any of the funds that the state provides through CVC. Even then, the funds are inadequate given the magnitude of their injuries. This family that I spoke about received the money for the 2 weeks lost wages, even though they've been told that the spouse that's injured won't be able to provide for herself for 6 months. So the husband had to quit his job to take care of her. So 6 months worth of incapacitation was rewarded by 2 weeks of lost wages. There is just no safety net to keep our families from losing all they have worked for and from becoming impoverished overnight because they just happen to be in the path of a mass shooter. And we hope that the state can address those concerns.
Thank you very much. Dr. Martinez?
Good afternoon, and I am the superintendent for a local school district. The youngest victim that was killed in the tragedy at Walmart was one of my students. And I'm here to speak on behalf of our community, on behalf of the groups of people that I met after the tragedy. And I met with a group of parents and students. And amongst the group of parents, there were some gun owners. One of them was actually a concealed carrier permit gun owner. And the consensus among the group was that if the state is not going to do anything to address gun violence in our state, specifically background checks, strengthening background checks, stop the sale of military weapons in our state, then the state should be responsible for the safety of our schools. We spend millions of dollars in paying salaries for, in my particular district, over $2 million in safety and security, paying sheriff's officers, armed officers who come with their vehicles and their weapons. And that money that we now are spending in the safety and security is money that we should use in the education of our students, and yet we are spending it in salaries for sheriff's officers. So again, I'm speaking on behalf of my community who was harmed by this horrible act. But also, I want to say on a personal note, 2 years ago, I requested, my son asked me to go get a permit for him to drive. It took me 3 hours. 3 hours of making sure that they had the proper documents, the proper papers. They sent me back home twice because the papers I took were under my wife's name and they needed to have it under my name. They requested an ID and they wouldn't take my ID issued by the state to get a license. I was not happy about it, so I went straight to the Five Sporting Goods place there and requested to purchase the largest weapon that they had. And I said, how long does it take? And they said, 10 minutes. To get a driver's license, it took me 3 hours for my son. It was a permit, actually. But to get a weapon, a large capacity weapon, the guy, according to the person there, was 10 minutes. No training, no requirements. He said, 10 minutes and you can walk up, using his words, with that baby. Well, I didn't buy that baby, I didn't need it. But again, it is insane that we will make those requirements for a driver's license and absolutely no requirements for a weapon that I can purchase and sell to someone else who may actually do harm in our community. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Any questions? Thank y'all for being here. And y'all are excused. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see Senator Rodriguez. Go ahead.
I have some questions.
Go ahead.
Ms. Carvajal first. Your testimony seemed to be that while there is a state crimes compensation fund and maybe some other support from the state, that it is woefully inadequate because your clients are depending on the foundations, the private donations, and even with that, it's still not enough to address the needs of some of these families.
Correct. And the main concern we have is that it takes, if everything is done correctly, if all the forms are submitted and things are accepted, it's still taking about 2 months for people to actually get money from CVC. In the case that I mentioned, from the very beginning, our social worker submitted evidence that the husband cannot work for 6 months while the wife is still receiving medical care. She cannot drive herself. She cannot take care of their 4 children. And so he can no longer work for 6 months. Even with that evidence, they were only given 2 weeks worth of lost wages, which is capped. There is no room for actually accounting for the person's actual wages or their actual expenses and obligations.
Okay. And similarly, Commissioner, I guess from the county standpoint, you enumerated all of those different costs of prosecution, of
Millions of dollars.
and so is your point that the state needs to do more there to assist counties with these kinds of expenses?
That's definitely the point that I was trying to make. We definitely need the state's assistance. You know, as I said, just for the prosecution, the defense, and the judicial costs, it's close to $5 million. And there are grants that we're applying for, but that doesn't mean we're going to get them, and they may not cover the full price, the full cost. And we don't know how long the trial is going to last. Those are just, base estimates that our departments have come up with. So we definitely need state assistance. As I pointed out, we only leverage $4 million with 1 cent on property tax, and so you can imagine that's more than 1 penny on our property tax. Just that $5 million that we're talking about, at a minimum for the cost for the prosecution, the judiciary, and the defense.
Well, I mean, I find that both of your testimony interesting because I don't think we've had a full discussion about the state's responsibility in regards to these mass shootings with respect to state assistance, state compensation, state support for communities that get impacted by these shootings. We have been focused, of course, on gun legislation, on what are we going to do about the white supremacists and so forth. But you opened up an area that I think we really do need to look at. There's never enough money. We know from experience, right, Dean? This type of development in the state where you've had 4 mass shootings in a row, I guess raises that question about what the state's role is going to be in terms of providing assistance and support. The governor came here right after the shooting, and he, in fact, in the very first meeting, offered some assistance, about $5 million. My understanding is that a lot of that still hasn't been dispersed to people. Maybe that's part of what has also been testified about the bureaucracy, but thank you for that testimony, because I think we really need to look at that as a state in terms of cost.
Thank you.
And I think, Dr. Martinez, maybe people don't realize you're not a physician, you're a super